Damn, places like this still exist. Xiao Ran was shocked. He, of course, had no interest in women of that caliber. He simply gestured towards Han Yun, and the other women automatically dispersed. Xiao Ran and Han Yun did a lap around the building materials market. However, what he needed now was fuel. Although it was available here, the supply was too small. They were only selling it a few liters at a time, and he really wasn't interested. Lu Wentau, on the other hand, was incredibly annoying. Whichever stall Xiao Ran visited, he would follow, then proceed to buy things ostentatiously, playing the part of a big spender, obviously trying to show off for Han Yun. But Xiao Ran didn't spare him a second glance, and neither did Han Yun. When they reached a certain area, both their expressions turned grim. Because while Xiao Ran could stomach them selling guns and ammunition, what were these people peddling? Children. And to make matters worse, quite a few people were inquiring about the price. Xiao Ran wasn't sure what these people intended to do with the children they bought, but they definitely weren't buying them to raise out of charity. Damn it, they all deserve to die. Let's go, Xiao Ran said. He never picked fights he wasn't sure he could win, so even if he wanted to tear this whole market apart, wouldn't be today. Han Yun nodded, thought for a moment, and said, that Lu Wentau is still following us. No problem, Xiao Ran smiled. He didn't want to make a move openly in a crowded place. It would expose the secret of his abilities. But if Lu Wentau dared to follow, and as it happened, his mood was already exceptionally foul. The two of them went outside and checked the time. It was past 4 p.m. It would take 2 hours to get back to Qingfeng Garden now, making it almost impossible to arrive before dark. Of course, Xiao Ran could navigate the last stretch using his spatial perception. Alternatively, he could go to Jufu Community, which was only an hour away and completely reachable before nightfall. The only downside was it would add an extra hour to their travel time tomorrow. Xiao Ran thought about it and decided to go to Jufu Community. Firstly, to deliver some supplies to Bai Ruei and the others. Secondly, he planned to bring Bai Ruei and Yin Xin, those two finest blossoms, to Qingfeng Garden. Su Qingmei and the others were studying diligently, but learning only for videos meant they could only grasp the superficial forms, not the true essence. So, they still needed a professional teacher to go back and guide them. The two left the market and went to where the hovercraft was parked. Well, the hovercraft hadn't been stolen. This showed Chao Sheening's grip on this place was ironclad. Everyone revered and feared him, daring not to steal. Behind them, Lu Wentau also followed. Seeing Xiao Ran and Han Yun actually board a hovercraft, his eyes widened in disbelief. What machine? What were the main modes of transport these days? Sleds, snowmobiles, skis. Most people wouldn't think of using a hovercraft, but this thing was actually very effective on snow. Everyone who'd used one said so. And the key? Sleds and snowmobiles had no protection against the cold. You could only brave it by layering up. But a hovercraft was different. It actually had a cabin. This provided excellent insulation, especially if you rigged up a stove or a heater inside. It could extend your time outdoors several times over, or even more. Perfect. He'd take the woman and the machine too. Soon, the hovercraft started, and Lu Wentau pursued them alone. Actually, he wasn't the only one eyeing Xiao Ran's hovercraft and companion. But when they saw Lu Wentau chase after them, and especially after two huge black iron wings sprouted from his back, the others obediently gave up the idea. An ability user. Who'd dare snatch something from an ability user? Were they tired of living? Xiao Ran was also surprised. He could guess Lu Wentau was an ability user, but he hadn't pegged him as a birdman. Wasn't there someone like that at Hope Camp too? But the difference between the two was quite significant. The one from Hope Camp had feathers with warming properties and could also emit concussive sound waves, possessing terrifying killing power. But this birdman, his feathers were like individual swords, radiating cold, not warmth. Whatever. He was a dead man walking. Xiao Ran drove the hovercraft, proceeding normally. After traveling 3 kilometers, Lu Wentau couldn't hold back any longer. He plummeted from the sky like an eagle spotting its prey, diving in for the kill. However, a strong sense of crisis suddenly welled up within him. Then he saw an enormous rock hurtling towards him. It was too fast. He couldn't dodge it at all. He had no choice but to fold his 2 iron wings in front of him for protection. Simultaneously, his body turned pitch black, like a block of iron. The rock slammed into him. Bang! His entire body was sent flying. Still airborne, he violently coughed up a mouthful of blood, his face instantly turning deathly white. What the hell? He hurriedly spread his wings again to stabilize himself. He saw that his iron wings were actually dented from the impact. No wonder the impact made him feel like his entire body was shattering. Even hardening his body to iron had been useless. He was drenched in blood. The fact that Xiao Ran was an ability user didn't surprise him. These days, who'd dare to swagger around with a woman in tow if they didn't have some serious backing? But abilities differed, and ability users naturally had varying levels of strength. Lu Wentau was full of confidence in his own strength. Never mind anything else. Didn't the mere ability to fly leave countless others grounded, green with envy? Moreover, he could attack from the air, essentially putting him in an invincible position. But, not wanting to damage the hovercraft, he decided to board it directly for the kill, only to unexpectedly suffer a major setback. Fury ignited within him, his eyes blazing with killing intent. He threw caution to the wind. As he flew, he beat his wings, shoo, 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 and countless iron feathers transformed into arrows, streaking towards the hovercraft. Someone's delivering weapons. Excellent. Xiao Ran opened a spatial gate. No matter how many attacks you throw at me, I'll gladly accept them all. Now I've got another offensive trick up my sleeve. Trying to guess my power type just got even harder. Lu Wentau froze. My feathered arrows? All those arrows. How did they just vanish without a trace? Lu Wentau hesitated. Should he continue his attack? To stop now, after chasing so aggressively, only to get pummeled by Xiao Ran's rock until his whole body ached. Internal bleeding was a certainty, maybe even a few broken bones. Retreating like this felt so unsatisfying. But would continuing the attack even work? Mulling it over, he flew rapidly, naturally afraid of getting hit again. I'm flying so fast, you shouldn't be able to aim at me, right? Xiao Ran smiled faintly. Lu Wentau was now flying at an altitude of about 30 meters, roughly 10 stories high. It wasn't exactly close, but still within the effective kill range of his spatial cut. Let's try this move. Lu Wentau was genuinely strong. Not only did he have wings to fly, but his body could also turn as hard as black iron, greatly increasing his defense. However, Xiao Ran had already scanned him with spatial perception. His iron transformation only covered the surface, about an inch thick, roughly 3 centimeters. That could definitely stop bullets, but against the sonic rock, he was still jolted enough to cough up blood because his internal organs weren't ironclad. What about your brain, then? Swish! Xiao Ran unleashed a spatial cut right at Lu Wentau. Arg! Lu Wentau shrieked. His left wing began to flap uncontrollably, instantly throwing his body off balance, sending him spiraling downwards diagonally. What was happening? Why couldn't he control one of his wings? True, it was dented in one area, but the other wing was similarly damaged. So why was this particular one unresponsive? He only felt a slight pain in his head, unaware that some of his cranial nerves had already been severed. At this moment, he had completely lost control of his body, tumbling and crashing to the ground. Pow! His struggles were futile as he slammed heavily into the snow, carving out a large crater and sending snow flying everywhere. Xiao Ran, meanwhile, pursued in his hovercraft. By the time he reached the spot, Lu Wentau was just climbing out of the snow crater. Seeing Xiao Ran open the hovercraft door and step out, Lu Wentau roared, "If you're a man, fight me head on. Stop with the sneaky ambushes." Xiao Ran was stunned. "You were the one sneaking up behind me, about to launch a surprise attack. My spatial perception just happened to catch you, allowing me to strike first. 2 moves and you were down. And now you're telling me honorable men don't do sneaky things, that real men fight head-on? TSK. Shamelessness truly makes one invincible, huh? Whatever. Not worth bothering about." With a thought, Xiao Ran sent another spatial cut at Lu Wentau. Lu Wentau clearly sensed the danger, but was completely unable to defend himself. He could only try his best to jerk his head aside. Luckily, he dodged just in time. The cut landed on his hair, but his hair had also undergone the iron transformation, rendering the blow useless. "Let's continue." Xiao Ran chuckled, launching another spatial cut. Cut! 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 Although Lu Wentau had a sense of impending danger, he didn't actually know where the threat was coming from. He could only rely on blindly dodging and pure luck. Most of the time, he managed to get lucky with his dodges, but there were always moments when his luck ran out. Arg! He suddenly lurched to one side. Because another part of his brain tissue had been severed, the nerves controlling his left leg. His entire left leg instantly went numb and unresponsive, causing him to topple sideways. Xiao Ran shook his head. The one on defense is always at a disadvantage. What does it matter if you block countless attacks? If just one gets through, you suffer greatly. For the attacker, it's the opposite. It doesn't matter how many attacks miss, as long as one hits home. Devoid of any sympathy, he delivered another cut, Lu Wentau could no longer dodge. He could only endure cut after cut. You can't kill me. My boss won't let you get away with this. Lu Wentau shrieked hysterically, his voice fierce but his demeanor betraying his terror. He was clearly scared out of his wits. Xiao Ran ignored him and continued his assault. 5 cuts, 10 cuts. Lu Wentau finally stopped moving. He passed peacefully, or so Xiao Ran thought, decisively ignoring Lu Wentau's contorted, ferocious expression. This guy's a boss. Heh, so what? You think you can mess with me, then just bring up some boss to make me stop? I've risked my life to become this strong, not to rule the world, but simply to do whatever I want without having to answer to anyone. So, you think some boss who hasn't even shown his face can scare me? Xiao Ran reached out, pressed his hand, and absorbed Lu Wentau's powers. Then he boarded the hovercraft again and continued towards Nine Fortunes estate. Before long, the side effects of absorbing the powers began to kick in. Got provisions? No. Got a woman? Not quite. Ah, it's a girl I have nearby, Xiao Ran mused. With her here, what's to be afraid of? Xiao Ran chuckled. Teacher Han, do you know what phrase we use to describe someone who's completely clueless? Lost in a fog. Han Yin asked, puzzled. Xiao Ran gave a mischievous grin. Change lost to face full of and fog to. Well, you get the idea. A face full of. Han Yin pondered for a moment. Then it dawned on her. A face full of stew. She stopped abruptly, her pretty face blushing crimson. Come. Xiao Ran seemed excited. The side effect were here. It couldn't be helped. It really wasn't his intention to engage in broad daylight debauchery. The hovercraft leisurely cruised into Nine Fortunes estate. Humming a little tune, Xiao Ran disembarked and walked to the villa's front door, which opened automatically. He still held the highest access privileges for this villa. With his spatial perception, everything inside was clear to him, so he acted casually and didn't bother opening a spatial gate. Xiao Ran, seeing him approach, Wei Liy and the others were overjoyed. It was true that this place was safe, and they didn't lack food or drink, but with Xiao Ran not showing up for so long, they couldn't help but worry. What if Xiao Ran had forgotten them? What would they do when the supplies ran out? They only had the strength to tie up a chicken, and were moreover used to being kept. Expecting them to find supplies and fend for themselves? How could they possibly manage that? Fortunately, Xiao Ran had finally arrived. Han Yun, on the other hand, was utterly astonished. So many beautiful women lived here. You sly dog, Xiao Ran. Who would have thought that someone looking so honest and upstanding would be hiding beauties in a golden chamber? Of course, the most she would do was grumble about it internally. Weren't she, Zhang Jingya, and the others also beauties kept by Xiao Ran in his golden chamber? It couldn't be helped. In these times, how could weak women survive without relying on someone strong? The crucial thing was, by following Xiao Ran, they could not only survive but also live very comfortably, better than almost anyone else in the world. Who would be willing to give that up? Next, Xiao Ran restocked supplies, including food and fuel. By then, the sky had darkened, and everyone began to eat dinner. Xiao Ran had never revealed his spatial abilities in front of Wei Liy and the others. The supplies he restocked were all carried off the hovercraft, so dinner consisted of instant food. Naturally, it wasn't delicious, merely enough to fill their stomachs. However, in these times, just being able to eat one's fill was already a great luxury. During dinner, Wei Liy and the others brought something up. A group of people had recently started watching them. Someone's got their eyes on us, Yin Qin said. Just 2 days ago, we happened to pull back the curtains to look outside, and that's when a group of people entered the residential complex, looking for supplies or perhaps survivors. We saw them, and they saw us. At first, they were very polite, trying to coax us into opening the door. But we were wary, and besides, we didn't even have the authority to open it. It was impossible for us to do so. So, after their attempts at persuasion failed, the group became furious and tried to break in. Speaking of defenses, this villa had undergone 80 million in renovations. Even explosives might not be enough to breach it, let alone this group armed with only simple weapons. They toiled all day, taking turns resting and trying to break down the door and walls, but it was all in vain. That night, they gave up and found a house in the complex to sleep in. They left the next day and haven't returned since. Xiao Ran couldn't help but ponder. Had the group truly given up, or had they gone to find more powerful weapons or equipment? Or perhaps, they might bring back Espers? Anything was possible. Xiao Ran still had a good deal of confidence in the villa. After all, a staggering 80 million had been sunk into it. If all that money had been converted into supplies back then, it would have formed a veritable mountain. However, while the villa could fend off ordinary people, what about Espers? Xiao Ran had originally planned to take only Wei Liy and Yin Sheen back tomorrow. But now that he knew about this incident, he decided to take everyone else with him. They would go to the Qinghong building. Invasions at night were practically impossible. Even Xiao Ran, relying on his spatial sense, could only navigate short distances. Unless there were clear tracks on the ground for him to follow, he'd get lost over longer distances too. So, nighttime was relatively safe, especially in a villa like this. Its 80 million renovated walls could withstand even powerful attacks. The night passed. Xiao Ran woke up and stretched lazily. Satisfying. Previously, when he saw news about certain tycoons like a boss Su, he might have felt a twinge of secret envy. But back then, he considered himself an upright man, and such thoughts were fleeting. Now, however, he was finally experiencing the kind of tycoon's joy. It's a joy far beyond what you can imagine. After breakfast, Xiao Ran waved his hand decisively. Everyone, let's go. Until that group is dealt with, this place might not be safe anymore. Yin Sheen and the others were reluctant to leave, but compared to the fear of falling into someone else's hands, they didn't mind the journey. They knew by now that Esper factions were forming one after another. If you didn't have an Esper ability, you'd be reduced to a laborer enslaved by others. Women had it even worse, as even useless men would seek them out to vent their frustrations. Though Yin Sheen and her companions were, well, in a related industry, they were high class. They used to serve only the rich and powerful, working, on average, only once every 2 or 3 days. But if they were to fall into the hands of some low-tier group and be forced into a crude brothel, they'd likely be forced to take clients nonstop until they were ravaged to death. The thought sent shivers down their spines. The hovercraft was crammed with 18 people, making it incredibly crowded. But they had to endure it. After all, it was dozens of degrees below zero outside. Who could stand such low temperatures? Over an hour later, they arrived at the Qinghong building. Yin Sheen and the others knew their way around this place. Returning here brought a mix of sighs and stirred up bad memories for them. Xiao Ran, meanwhile, refueled the generator and restarted it. As the room warmed up, the women's hearts gradually settled. This place was hard to find, and as long as it remained undiscovered, it was very safe. After settling everyone in, Xiao Ran set off again with Han Yun, Yin Sheen, and Bai Rui, heading back to Qingfeng Garden. The other women were very envious of Yin Sheen and Bai Rui, but who could blame them? The two were top tier in looks, figure, and talent. Such qualities couldn't be envied away. Xiao Ran took the 3 women back to Qingfeng Garden. He still had to go to Hope Camp later, so he had a lot to do and no time to waste. After a journey of over 2 hours, the 4 of them returned to Qingfeng Garden. Seeing Xiao Ran return from his trip with 2 more exceptionally beautiful women, the other women in Qingfeng Garden couldn't help but feel a little insecure. However, when Xiao Ran introduced Yin Sheen and Bai Rui, he presented them as teachers. From today onwards, you all must learn diligently from these 2 teachers every day and strive to graduate soon. Huh? Learn what? Xiao Ran didn't elaborate. Anyway, wouldn't they understand once Bai Rui and the others started teaching them? He then rushed off to Hope Camp. Today, 15 people had reached the critical point. Begin. After the procedure, the result was 4 dead and 11 alive. And among the 11 survivors, an Esper had actually been born. To Xiao Ran's surprise, it was an old man. Ha ha ha, I never thought I'd experience a second spring. The old man laughed heartily, raising his hands to the sky, an air of domineering arrogance about him, as if scorning everything. Then, he looked at the other 10 survivors. The 10 survivors were initially baffled, but they quickly sensed something was wrong. Their heads were actually swelling. How could a person's head swell? Unless, bang, bang, bang. In the next instant, their heads exploded like watermelons. Instantly, red and white matter splattered all over the floor and walls. This is my power. The old man stared at his hands in disbelief, his face filled with excitement and elation. He had no grudge against those 10 people. He attacked them without hesitation, simply because he wanted to test the wondrous new power burgeoning within him. The old coot was quite ruthless. But then again, anyone who had survived until now, even if they seemed like an ordinary person before, was unlikely to be a pushover. The old man got out of bed, feeling his body brimming with vitality, no longer frail like before. He even felt a long-lost stirring of desire, making his spirits soar and his heart itch with anticipation. He opened the door and walked out, spotting several nurses. He immediately grinned and said, "All of you, take off your clothes." Just then, Xiao Ran emerged from the next room. Though he had his spatial portal that could have absorbed the splattered gore, why bother? Was it the adjacent room perfectly suitable for such procedures. He waved his hand at the nurses. "You can go." The nurses, as if granted amnesty, quickly scurried away. The old man, however, whipped his head around, his beady, triangular eyes glaring viciously at Xiao Ran. "You dare interfere? I'll make you." Before he could finish his sentence, the vicious light in his eyes vanished, killed instantly by a spatial slash. A newly awakened Esper, still unskilled in using their abilities, let alone possessing any sense of crisis premonition. Xiao Ran reached out and pressed. A warm current flowed. He glanced at the old man's crotch and couldn't help but chuckle. So the old tree really did blossom. Xiao Ran was very pleased. Even a mosquito's leg was still meat. One more ability was still an ability. He wasn't picky. Lu Wentau from yesterday, the unnamed old man from today. These two abilities had also increased the maximum range of his spatial perception and cutting by 2 meters, but his spatial gate and banishment abilities remained unchanged. Furthermore, no 5th ability had begun to sprout. Xiao Ran desperately hoped for a 5th ability, preferably teleportation. However, there weren't many patients left here. By his calculations, it would all be over in about 3 more days. Xiao Ran left some supplies as usual, then returned to Qingfeng Garden. However, he had only returned to Qingfeng Garden from Jufu residential area that morning, a journey that took over 3 hours. By the time he reached Hope Camp, it was already afternoon. After finishing his business and returning to Qingfeng Garden, it was nearing evening, so he didn't go out again and instead waited for dinner. Su Qingmei and the others had already attended one lesson with teachers Yin and Bai. All of them had flushed faces and were incredibly shy. So embarrassing. They had thought they'd grasped the essence from watching those short videos, but after the 2 teachers critiqued them, they realized they had only learned the form, not the core principles at all. Only little green tea ran over excitedly to Xiao Ran, saying, "Gidge, let's go upstairs and try it out." Coincidentally, the side effect from absorbing the old man's ability hadn't yet subsided for Xiao Ran, so he readily agreed. Black stockings, white stockings, yoga pants. Little green tea had many tricks up her sleeve, and she had indeed improved a lot. Xiao Ran nodded. As expected of a top student, the key was her willingness to learn, her proactiveness, and her complete lack of resistance. This year's AAA Student Award definitely belongs to you. Serving Gidge is what I ought to do. After dinner, all the women went for a swim. Watching the mermaids glide through the water, Xiao Ran felt a deep sense of satisfaction. All his hard work hadn't been in vain. However, not everyone was swimming. Although Bai Rui had changed into a swimsuit, she merely sat at the edge of the pool, dangling her legs in the water and kicking at the surface. Xiao Ran walked over. "Why aren't you getting in?" I can't swim," she said, her face flushing slightly. Xiao Ran chuckled. "I'll teach you." He jumped in the water first, then pulled Bai Rui in. With a splash, Bai Rui instinctively clung tightly to Xiao Ran, letting out a startled cry. Xiao Ran laughed heartily. "Don't be nervous. I won't let you swallow any water. Take it slow." As one taught and the other learned, the physical contact soon diverted Xiao Ran's attention. "It's so smooth." "Green tea, you've met your match." Su Xinran swam over to Zhou Junsu's side, nudging her chin. "That Bai woman clearly knows how to swim. She's just faking it." Previously, only Zhou Junsu would pull such stunts. Zhou Junsu glanced disdainfully. With her level of T-art, she thinks she can compete with me? When it came to T-art, it wasn't that she looked down on them, but everyone present was trash. An absurd night passed. Today, Xiao Ran's schedule was the same as before. First, he went to Hope Camp to check on the patients. Unfortunately, although 12 of the 14 people today survived, not a single one awakened an ability, which left him slightly disappointed. However, thanks to his intervention, 2 ability users had already emerged. Even if no new ones appeared, this rate was already over 2%. A huge improvement. In the afternoon, Xiao Ran decided to visit the building materials market again. He didn't need to buy anything, but he needed to gather intelligence, whether it was about the overall power structure of Suching or how many ability users Chao Sheening had under him at this market. Intelligence was crucial these days. If only one of the women could awaken an ability like clairvoyance or clairaudience. Xiao Chuchio was still the same, her high fever unrelenting. A normal person would have been finished with such a fever, yet her vital signs were surprisingly stable. The evolution of life was truly miraculous. The energy within her body had strengthened somewhat, but it still hadn't reached the stage of forming a seed in her mind, which meant Xiao Ran couldn't intervene. He could only wait a bit longer. Picking his companion for the day, he decided on Officer Jiang. Xiao Ran and Jiang Yuning set out. Over an hour later, They arrived at the building materials market. After parking the hovercraft, the two entered. When people saw Xiao Ran today, their expressions clearly carried a sense of awe and fear. Yesterday, Lu Wentau had transformed into a birdman to chase Xiao Ran, a scene witnessed by many. But today, only Xiao Ran had returned. Setting aside whether Lu Wentau was dead or alive, the mere fact that Xiao Ran could escape unharmed from the pursuit of an ability user demonstrated his formidable strength. And what if Xiao Ran had actually killed Lu Wentau? That would make Xiao Ran even more powerful. Xiao Ran himself was unconcerned. As long as no clueless fools bothered him, he was happy to enjoy the peace. He began asking around, trying to get a sense of Su Qing's current power dynamics. Most people were only concerned with their own survival, but there were always some who were better informed. Moreover, the people here were survivors from various districts of Suqing. By piecing together their information, he could get a rough picture of the city's current layout. Currently, Suqing had 5 major powers, all of which were rapidly expanding. The first was in the industrial park, occupying a gas company. They had a large supply of bottled liquefied gas, so heating was not an issue. Their leader was Gao Yong, an ability user whose specific abilities were unknown, and he had many elite fighters under him. The second was in Xiangqing district, also occupying a gas company. The boss was Lu Yifei, his abilities also unknown, with numerous subordinates. The third was in the new district, Wei Liy's hot spring hotel. Since the hot springs provided a natural supply, they were the least worried about heating. Originally, there had also been a powerful steel mill faction in the new district, but Wei Liy had wiped them out some time ago, so now she held sole dominance there. The fourth was in Wuzhong district, the Suqing Bay underground complex, led by Chengqian. The fifth was this very building materials market, located in Gusa district. Chao Sheening was considered on par with the leaders of the other 4 major powers. Xiao Ran was somewhat surprised. Chengqian's faction was actually quite strong, enough to be ranked among the top 5. However, Chengqian didn't yet know that Xiao Ran had killed his subordinate. Thus, the initiative to start a war rested in Xiao Ran's hands. Shouldn't Wuzhong district also be on the list? The famously fragmented nature of Greater Su province. One wondered if the people of Wuzhong had even agreed to this lineup. Sir, our boss requests your presence. A man who looked like a security guard from the building materials market approached him. Xiao Ran didn't find anything amiss. Any discerning person could guess that Lu Wentau had met his end at his hands. As the boss of the building materials market, it was natural for Chao Sheening to show some interest. But out of caution, he remained prepared to turn hostile and fight if necessary. 5th floor, Chao Sheening's office and residence. Chao Sheening was still holding a dog leash, looking calm and composed. Beside him were Wan Haichao and the young man from yesterday, whose name was Suhi. Boss, should we just take him down directly later? Suhi asked, a little excited. Chao Sheening was trimming his nails with clippers and said without looking up, "Why is your mind always full of fighting and killing? Are we savages living in a primitive society?" Suhi looked a bit sheepish. Besides, Chao Sheening added, "Never underestimate any Esper. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died." He finished trimming his nails, placed the clippers on the table, tapped it lightly, and muttered, "The goods aren't in the warehouse. Where could they be? Over 3 billion in supplies." He had sent people yesterday to check the warehouse Xiao Ran had previously rented, but it was empty. This was strange. Over 3 billion in supplies. If it was all food, how massive a mountain would it form if piled together? So, where had Xiao Ran hidden such a vast amount of supplies? Suqing was such a tiny place. Why did one see Xiao Ran? That was the key point. Over 3 billion in supplies. A fortune that could drive anyone mad now. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Chao Sheening grunted through his nose. "Boss, mister. Xiao has been brought over. Invite him in." Chao Sheening stood up. The door opened, and a security guard made an inviting gesture, letting Xiao Ran and his companion in. Chao Sheening immediately broke into a smile, strode toward Xiao Ran, and enthusiastically extended his hands. "Mr. Xiao, hello." Xiao Ran's heart skipped a beat. He pressed his own hand down slightly, politely refusing. "Let's skip the handshake. You don't trust me, and I don't trust you." Who knew what kind of powers could be activated through physical contact? It was best to keep a distance. Damn, this guy's something else. Wan Haichao and Suhi both clicked their tongues in amazement. They hadn't expected Xiao Ran to dare say such a thing to Chao Sheening's face, giving him no face at all. After a moment of shock, Chao Sheening burst out laughing. Yes, you're right. I wasn't thoughtful enough. Please forgive me, mister. Xiao, come please sit." Only then did Xiao Ran walk to the sofa and plop himself down. Jiang Yuning didn't say anything, just sat down close to Xiao Ran. She was terrified. Ever since entering the building materials market, every man who looked at her had eyes like a beast in heat. She had only seen such gazes from the most hardened criminals in the detention center. So, just how terrifying were the people here? She had sat down, but it was like sitting on pins and needles. She kept her head down, only occasionally glancing at the man sprawled on the floor. Xiao Ran, however, was sizing up Chao Sheening with interest. Why did this man want to shake hands right away? In these times, who wasn't wary of others, to become the leader of a faction, could Chao Sheening possibly be an idiot or a brute? So, for this man to rashly try to shake hand upon meeting, Xiao Ran could only assume that his ability required physical contact to activate. Or at least, it was a necessary condition for one of his abilities, and it was definitely a powerful one. Brainwashing? Killing? Both were possible. Boss Chiao invited me here. For what guidance? He asked calmly. Chao Sheening smiled. Guidance is too strong a word. I'm just curious if Mr. Xiao knows Lu Wentau's identity. I don't. Xiao Ran shook his head decisively. He'd already killed the man. Why bother with his identity? Didn't he just have some boss? Chao Sheening chuckled. Lu Wentau had pledged allegiance to Boss Wei. That's Wei Liy from Shaoyang Mountain, a very formidable woman. He paused, then added, truly formidable. Xiao Ran wasn't surprised. How could someone who became a faction leader not be strong? Besides, Suching had a population of nearly 5 million. Assuming even a fifth were still alive, that was 1 million people. Averaging that out, each district would have 200,000 survivors. To stand out among 200,000 people, she definitely wouldn't be ordinary. He was curious how Wei Liy compared to Lu Yong. If she was only at Lu Yong's level, he could completely crush this faction without any hesitation. Chao Sheening glanced at Xiao Ran and was slightly disappointed to see him unfazed. He had hoped Xiao Ran would show some nervousness, making it unlikely for him to refuse the upcoming proposal. But he still had to try. Mr. Xiao, let me introduce you to this person. Chao Sheening pointed at Suhi. His name is Suhi. Like us, he's an Esper. And Suhi's ability is to communicate with satellites, read information from any server, and bypass all firewalls. This ability is so useless. No, wait. If the country was just temporarily hidden, and the major military regions were still preserving their strength, then various advanced weapons could naturally still be used. This guy can communicate with satellites and bypass firewalls. Could he control those weapons? Seeing Xiao Ran look serious, Chao Sheening quickly smiled. It's probably not as powerful as Mr. Xiao imagines, so he can only read information. He can't issue any commands. Ugh, then this ability really is useless. This isn't before the apocalypse. Otherwise, with this ability to spy on major corporations' secrets, Suhi could have made a fortune. But now, let alone the power outages and network disconnections, even if you could get company secrets, what good would it do? Chao Sheening smiled again. Actually, some servers haven't been powered down or shut off. It's just that the internet is paralyzed, so we can't access them via phones or computers. But still possible via satellite. After seeing Mr. Xiao the day before yesterday, Suhi took the liberty of looking up your information. TSK. We wouldn't have known if we hadn't looked, but what a shock it was. It turns out Mr. Xiao was a tycoon worth over 3 billion, and, quite coincidentally, you spent all your money before the apocalypse, converting it all into supplies. What the hell? Xiao Ran couldn't help but look at Suhi. Such an Esper ability actually existed in the world. No wonder you guys know my real identity. He had thought no one could uncover his background. Not even Su Qingmei and the other women knew exactly how many supplies he had hoarded. He never imagined Suhi would have such an ability. And even more coincidentally, the servers for banks, securities firms, and shopping platforms were still running. This is too outrageous. So, these people knew he had hoarded over 3 billion in supplies. Should he kill them all immediately? But did anyone else know? Chao Sheening smiled again and said, Mr. Xiao, I have a proposal. Would you like to hear it? For example, you hand over those supplies, and I'll be responsible for your safety. How about it? Xiao Ran looked at him and said calmly, Aren't you afraid Wei Liy will come after you? Ready to fight to the death? He had already made his decision. This whole group had to die. But he didn't act immediately because he was still inside this building. Once he got out, he would use all the rockets in his dimensional space and raze this place to the ground. The day before yesterday, when he discovered they were trading children here, he had already developed the intent to kill. He only refrained from acting impulsively because he didn't know the types and strengths of Chao Sheening and his subordinates' abilities. He never liked to do things he wasn't sure about. Chiao, Sheening, shook his head. That Wei woman is indeed very strong, but I'm not weak either. If she really insists on fighting me to the death, she won't. It would only lead to mutual destruction, letting the other factions laugh their heads off. So, as long as I'm willing to protect you with all my strength, that Wei woman absolutely wouldn't dare to touch you. Chiao Sheening spoke with an air of absolute confidence, practically beating his chest in assurance. Xiao Ran, firstly, had no intention of handing over the supplies, and secondly, he didn't believe a single word Chiao Sheening said, not even the punctuation. He said calmly, and I'm just saying if, I really did have those supplies Boss Chiao mentioned, and I handed them over to you, Boss Chiao. What's to stop you from turning around and selling me out to Wei Liy? That way, you'd get the supplies and earn a favor from Wei Liy. TSK. Wouldn't that be even better? Ha ha. Chiao Sheening roared with laughter, as if he'd heard the funniest joke in the world. But inwardly, he was ice cold, because that was exactly what he was thinking. And to ensure Xiao Ran wouldn't blab, say, about him obtaining over 3 billion in supplies, which would attract attacks from all sides, he would have sealed Xiao Ran's mouth and chopped off his hands, making him unable to speak or write. Yet Xiao Ran had guessed his intentions right from the start. It seemed they were cut from the same cloth. Of course, he couldn't possibly admit it. After his burst of laughter, he shook his head. Mr. Xiao, you underestimate me. I, Chiao, am not such a petty man. He spoke with conviction, his words firm and resonant. Xiao Ran couldn't be bothered to refute him and said with a smile, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. I won't see you out. Chiao Sheening also wore a smile. Xiao Ran, with Jiang Yuning on his arm, walked out. Bang! The door slammed shut. Damn it, that suspicious bastard. Chiao Sheening threw a fierce, empty punch at the air. Damn it all. Xiao Ran had avoided his handshake at the beginning, and his later proposal was also rejected. If either one had succeeded, Xiao Ran wouldn't have been a problem. But, forget it. He didn't want to dwell on it. He looked at a hand gripper left on the table. It wasn't his. So, obviously, Xiao Ran had left it. However, the hand gripper was broken, the spring twisted and mangled. Interesting. Is this a warning? His expression became composed. Strong enough to break a hand gripper so easily? Are you a strength-type ability user? Brutes can be a bit troublesome, but they're actually quite easy to deal with. The hand gripper, of course, was deliberately left by Xiao Ran as a misdirection, and Chiao Sheening had indeed fallen for it. Boss, this guy doesn't know what's good for him. Should we take him out right now? Wan Haichao asked excitedly, still at the building materials market. Fighting and killing, that's what he loved most. Chiao Sheening thought for a moment, then smiled. This Xiao Ran is so calm. He must have something up his sleeve. So, why should we be the first to test these dangerous waters? Send someone to Little Sun Mountain and inform that Wei woman. One of her subordinates was killed by Xiao Ran. If she doesn't seek revenge against him, how could she face her people, right? Boss, aren't you afraid Xiao Ran will reveal that he has over 3 billion supplies? So he quickly asked, that's over 3 billion, not 300,000. Chiao Sheening laughed. Unless that Xiao Ran is crazy, why would he tell that Wei woman about it? But what if Xiao Ran is pushed too hard and has to reveal it to save his own skin? So he asked. Chiao Sheening looked nonchalant. That Wei woman won't make a move herself right away. She'll definitely send her subordinates first. So, we can let them test Xiao Ran's strength. When they've worn each other down, we'll make our move, wipe them all out, silence them permanently, and then interrogate him for those supplies worth over 3 billion. How would that Wei woman know it was us who struck? Wait, I don't even need to inform that Wei woman. Lu Wentau was taken down nearby the day before yesterday. She should have received news of it already. So, we just need to wait for her to send people to scout out information on Xiao Ran. Then we could do her a favor and give her Xiao Ran's address. Then, if her men die or are defeated, how can she blame us, right? After all, I'm no pushover either. Hearing this, both Wan Haichao and Su He nodded repeatedly, their expressions filled with awe and fear as they looked at Chiao Sheening. The boss was so ruthless. When that Wei woman's people arrive, you immediately take some men and lie in wait near Xiao Ran's place. We'll wait for the prey to walk into our trap and reap the rewards like the fishermen, Chiao Sheening said to Wan Haichao. Maintain communication via radio. If the distance is too great, arrange for a few people in between to relay messages. I'll rush over with reinforcements at the earliest opportunity. Don't worry, boss. Wan Haichao slapped his chest in assurance. Xiao Ran and Jiang Yuning walked out the door and down the stairs. It wasn't until they reached the ground floor that Jiang Yuning finally spoke, Those three men have ill intentions. I know. Xiao Ran nodded with a smile. If he were Chao Sheening, what'd he do right now? First, strike right here, since he has the home field advantage. However, not knowing the opponent's true strength, what if he ran into someone too strong? So, out of caution, it would be logical to let others test the waters. This leads to the second approach. Inform Wei Liy. Someone killed your subordinate. If you don't react, who will follow you in the future? Besides, yesterday, Lu Wentau was seen leaving with me by many people, so Wei Liy should already know. And what she'll do is send people to the market to gather information about me. Chao Sheening only knows my address in the Jiao Fu residential district, but he doesn't know I've already moved to Qingfeng Garden. So, Wei Liy will also assume I live there. But things won't be that troublesome. After today, there will be no more building materials market, and Chao Sheening must die. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, then took another stroll around the market. To his surprise, he didn't see the group of people who were selling children the day before yesterday. Upon asking, he learned they had sold all the children yesterday. They were probably out capturing new ones and wouldn't be at the market for a few days. Consider yourselves lucky you've escaped this time, Xiao Ran thought. Xiao Ran was about to lead Jiang Yuning out, but before they had taken more than a few steps, a man ran over with an incredulous expression. Officer Jiang. You're Officer Jiang, the man exclaimed in pleasant surprise. Xiao Ran sighed inwardly. Yesterday, it was someone looking for Han Yun. Today, it was someone for Jiang Yuning. This was the downside of collecting goddesses. Love rivals popped up everywhere. Fine, I'll just humiliate them directly. Yesterday, he had restrained himself, not wanting to completely fall out with Chao Sheening. After all, they had no prior grudges, and he didn't want to make enemies everywhere. But today was different. Chao Sheening had threatened him. Did he still need to give him face? If I cause trouble here, will you dare to intervene? Heh, I'll flatten this place later. Seeing him, Jiang Yuning couldn't help but lean close to Xiao Ran's ear and whisper, his name is Song Yu. Before the apocalypse, I think he was the son of some bureau director. No idea what he does now. Seeing Jiang Yuning so close to Xiao Ran, Song Yu flew into a rage and immediately pointed accusingly. Who the hell are you? Why are you so intimate with Officer Jiang? Do I need to explain myself to you? Xiao Ran ignored him. There was no need to pay attention to such a small fry. Let's go. He put his arm around Jiang Yuning's waist and started to walk away. Stop. Song Yu, however, tactlessly blocked their path. Officer Jiang, tell me, who is this man? Who is he? Jiang Yuning furrowed her pretty, willow leaf-shaped eyebrows. Song Yu, what do you mean by this? What relationship do I have with you that gives you the right to interfere in my affairs? Song Yu couldn't hold back and blurted out. Young Master Gao has already declared that you're his woman. He's here right now. If you don't want to make young Master Gao angry, you'd better come with me obediently. Xiao Ran immediately perked up. Let's go. I gotta see this young Master Gao for myself. How thick-skinned can one guy be? He wore a broad grin. Clearly, he was spoiling for trouble. Chao Sheening dared to threaten him? Even dug up dirt on his past. That alone had ignited a murderous fury in Xiao Ran. First I'll stir the pot, then I'll blow this pathetic marketplace to hell. Song Yu hadn't expected Xiao Ran to react like this, and was momentarily stunned, stars practically spinning in his head. Someone's not afraid of young Master Gao. Oh, right. This idiot probably had no clue how powerful Gao really was. He sneered coldly. Do you even know who young Master Gao is? Before Xiao Ran could respond, Song Yu jumped in again. Before the apocalypse, his dad was basically, he gave a big thumbs-up gesture. Xiao Ran thought about it for a second. None of the top leaders in Sioux City were named Gao. Oh wait, maybe one of the lower tier ones? Could it be him? After the world fell apart, both the old man and young master, Gao, awakened powers. Two power wielders from the same family. You think there's a second case like that in all of Sioux City? And you know who the old man is? One of the 5 top powers in the city, Gao Yong. So it was him. Xiao Ran nodded slightly to himself. He'd heard the name Gao Yong before and thought it sounded familiar, but hadn't given it much thought. Now that Song Yu connected the dots, it all made sense. Still, father and son awakening powers together. That was a first. Well then, all the more reason to meet this guy face to face, Xiao Ran said with a grin. He had a quick mental calculation. Even if I piss off someone like Gao Yong, what's the worst that can happen? Besides, who's to say Song Yu and this so-called young Master Gao will even survive long enough to report back? He thought about it again and figured these two were destined to die today. A fatal destiny. Song Yu hesitated. Xiao Ran clearly knew about the Gao family's previous status and their current power user dominance. yet still dared to demand a meeting with young Master Gao? What the hell did that mean? Was this guy some kind of dark horse from another city? Or just a brain-dead lunatic? He didn't know, but he had seen Jiang Yuning. If he let her go after recognizing her, and said nothing, he could kiss his cushy life goodbye. He wasn't a power user. Everything he had came from clinging to young Master Gao. Food, comfort, women, even better than before the apocalypse. He'd do anything to keep that lifestyle going. No way he'd risk Gao's disapproval. Fine, since you're so eager to meet him, come with me. He made up his mind. A decision he would come to regret deeply. Song led the way, with Xiao Ran and Jiang Yuning following behind. Truth be told, he'd only come out to take a leak, so they weren't far from young Master Gao. Within minutes, he brought them face to face with the man himself. Young Master Gao, guess who I ran into? Song trotted up to a man in his late 20s, bending so low he might as well have been licking boots, flattery oozing from every pore. He'd been Gao's lapdog before the apocalypse, and clearly saw no reason to change after it. Sycophancy was second nature to him by now. Young Master Gao, full name Gao Bushwan, was decently good-looking, about 5'9". His hair was meticulously combed, not a strand out of place. Unbelievably rare in this apocalyptic world. Even more shocking, he actually looked clean. Unlike the rest of the grimy survivors, he looked like he showered daily. Though Song said, guess who? He quickly stepped aside to reveal Jiang Yuning. Gao Bushwan's eyes immediately lit up. Officer Jiang. He beamed. Before the apocalypse, he'd gone to the police station over some petty grievance, ready to verbally trash the commissioner, only to lay eyes on the stunning female officer and instantly fall head over heels. Sure, he'd been with plenty of beautiful women, two of them arguably just as hot, but there was something about a gorgeous woman in uniform that drove him wild. He'd fantasized about role-playing with her, imagining himself as a criminal and Jiang Yuning as the stern officer interrogating him. That alone had revived a libido, so overused it now relied on little blue pills to function. He abandoned his rage against the commissioner and spent the entire afternoon tailing Jiang Yuning. At first, he thought his status would be enough to win her over. Turns out, she wasn't materialistic and didn't care much for climbing the ladder either. So, he shifted tactics and started pursuing her sincerely. Unfortunately, Officer Jiang had no shortage of suitors. One was even the son of a higher-ranking official than Gao Bushwan's father. That shut down any idea of playing dirty. All he could do was chase her like a normal guy. But before he could get anywhere, bam, the world ended. After that, he'd visited high-end clubs where women dressed as cops for his entertainment. But it wasn't the same. The outfits were fake, and so was the vibe. It only made him crave Jiang Yuning more. Eventually, he gave up. She was probably dead anyway. And even if she wasn't with that face, she was probably long broken by now. But now, there she was, standing right in front of him, alive, whole, and somehow even hotter than before, more mature, more seductive. He froze for a beat before the realization hit. Jiang Yuning has become a real woman now. Then his eyes turned sharp, landing on Xiao Ran like daggers. His rage boiled over. So, this is the bastard who's had her? You're dead. Jiang Yuning instinctively leaned a little closer to Xiao Ran. She'd always been a little afraid of Gao Bushwan. Xiao Ran slipped an arm around her waist and said calmly, she's my woman. Look at her like that again, and I'll gouge your damn eyes out. Gao Bushwan blinked, then burst into uncontrollable laughter, slapping his thigh and nearly crying from amusement. He turned to Song Yu, grinning like a madman. He said he's going to gouge out my eyes. Ha ha, isn't that the funniest thing you've ever heard? Song Yu was panicking inside, but he didn't dare disagree. He laughed along awkwardly. Absolutely hilarious. Threatening our young Master Gao. He must have a death wish. With tensions escalating, the surrounding crowd started to gather, eager for a show. No one in this hellscape cared about being virtuous anymore. Come on, fight already. What good are words? Yeah, whoever wins gets the girl. Wait, seriously? Count me in. Are you stupid? Don't you know who that is? Gao Bushwan, son of Gao Yong. Oh crap. That wasn't me talking just now. Ha, definitely wasn't me. Gao Bushwan finally stopped laughing. His expression went ice cold in an instant. He glared at Xiao Ran. Let's take this outside. Just like they said, whoever wins gets the woman. But let's add one more rule, he said, voice low and deadly. Loser pays with his life. What was the point of this game for Xiao Ran? If he lost, the woman and his life would be gone. If he won, he gained nothing. Would only a fool agree? All right, Xiao Ran nodded. He not only wanted Gao Bushwan's life, but also intended to destroy the entire building materials market and slaughter Sheening's entire group. Knowing he possessed vast supplies, did they really think they could survive? What were they dreaming of? So, he couldn't care less what Gao Bushwan wanted to bet. Young Master Gao, be careful. Song Yu interjected with a warning. He believed Xiao Ran was an idiot. So what did such audacity imply? Xiao Ran had to be strong. Gao Bushwan, however, was full of scorn. He was brimming with confidence in his own abilities. Since the apocalypse began, how many powers had he absorbed? Through traps, lures, and outright force, the total had reached 20. He was so strong now, it almost scared himself. Just kidding. He was merely satisfied, immensely proud. Once he killed Xiao Ran, he would make Jiang Yuning wear that police uniform and really have his way with her. Absorbing powers had side effects, after all, and this was a rare moment of glory for him, a chance to perform impressively without relying on those little blue pills. Xiao Ran still had his arm around Jiang Yuning. After they left the building materials market, he deliberately patted her shapely rear. Go wait for me on the boat. Jiang Yuning obediently went. Gao Bushwan didn't stop her. He even chuckled. Well, you even have a hovercraft. Hee, not bad at all. I'll take care of business on it later. Save me the trouble of finding another spot. Enough pointless talk. Xiao Ran sneered, and a spatial cut had already been launched. A powerful sense of crisis washed over Gao Bushwan. He instantly ducked, simultaneously bending his knees to spring away. However, he had severely underestimated Xiao Ran and grossly overestimated himself. How many powers had Xiao Ran absorbed? The body count wasn't as high, but in terms of pure ability energy, he had absorbed nearly 59 distinct powers. 59. Was Gao Bushwan even in the same league? Xiao Ran had now mastered spatial cut to an incredibly refined degree. With a single thought, he could unleash the space blade, the casting time, a mere fraction of a second. Even a physical type adept like Lu Yong would find it hard to dodge. Gao Bushwan was no physical type. So, he let out a muffled grunt. His legs bent, but he didn't spring up. The command from his brain couldn't even get through. The relevant cranial nerves had been severed. Xiao Ran smiled and sent another spatial cut slashing through the air. This time, Gao Bushwan was finally prepared. With a rumble, the earth trembled, and the ground bulged upwards, surging towards Gao Bushwan, encasing him in layer upon layer of earth. His ability was earth-related. He could form earthen walls and stone shields in front of himself, or create a chasm beneath an enemy, causing them to fall in before sealing it with earth, burying them alive. But now, he had no time to attack. His only thought was to protect himself. However, what good were thick earthen walls? His brain was struck by another blade, nearly causing him to die on the spot. In the distance, everyone inside the building materials market was watching the battle from behind rows of windows. No one dared to step outside. It was simply too cold, unless by chance their ability was ice-related, in which case the frigid weather was not a threat but an advantage. What's happening? I don't get it. Why did Gao Bushwan suddenly wrap himself in earth and stone like that? How can he attack from in there? Is he planning to let his opponent freeze to death? You guys just don't understand. Gao Bushwan must be stacking armor. Once he's shored up his defenses, he can attack freely. Oh, so that's it. The crowd chattered, while on the 5th floor, Chao Sheening stood by a window, hands clasped behind his back, observing. He hadn't intervened earlier due to his inherent caution. He didn't want to rashly make an enemy of Xiao Ran before understanding his true strength, which was why he'd let Wei Liy's group test the waters first. Unexpectedly, Gao Bushwan had directly confronted Xiao Ran. So, he would use this opportunity to gauge Xiao Ran's power. If he wasn't too strong, he'd take him down today and seize those supplies worth over 3 billion. Strange. Gao Bushwan is clearly defending for his life, but I haven't seen Xiao Ran make a single move. Chao Sheening mused, a look of surprise on his face. Earlier, Xiao Ran had left behind a broken hand grip exerciser, leading him to suspect Xiao Ran was a strength-type Esper. But could such an Esper force someone to use their ultimate defensive abilities without even moving? Chao Sheening frowned deeply, completely baffled. He glanced at Wan Haichao and Su He beside him and decisively chose not to ask. Questioning those two idiots would be less productive than figuring it out himself. Meanwhile, Gao Bushwan, in the midst of the fight, was already in a desperate predicament. He had thought that by erecting a great wall of earth and stone to shield himself, he could save his life. But it was useless. He discovered he had lost control of his limbs, as if all the relevant nerves had been severed. How could this be? He hadn't even seen Xiao Ran lift a finger, and yet he was about to be finished? If he had known, he would never have provoked Xiao Ran. It truly wasn't worth it for a woman. But what use was regret now? He was a ruthless man in his own right. In a final, desperate act, he pointed a finger at Xiao Ran and fully unleashed his power. Instantly, all the earth within a 5-meter radius around Xiao Ran vanished, forming a massive pit 20 meters deep. Gao Bushwan screamed internally, his eyes fluttering weakly shut. He no longer had the strength to fill that pit. Danger! Xiao Ran immediately used banishment on himself, and so, everyone witnessed a scene that made their scalps tingle. A huge pit had appeared beneath Xiao Ran's feet, yet he completely defied gravity, hovering steadily in mid-air. What kind of ability was this? Once activated, banishment continuously drained ability energy, and the consumption was significant. Xiao Ran had used it instinctively because he sensed danger. Adhering to the principle that his own life was paramount, he naturally used banishment first before assessing the situation. Damn, this is awkward, he thought. To others, he looked incredibly cool, but Xiao Ran was gritting his teeth inwardly, as he was the one burning through his energy. Forget it. Whatever. With a thought, a giant sheet of glass materialized beneath his feet. How big? Large enough to cover the entire chasm. But because the glass was transparent, and with no sun in the sky, there was no reflection or refraction of light. Consequently, practically no one noticed the glass. So, they witnessed another scene that blew their minds. Xiao Ran simply walked across on thin air. Oh my god! Xiao Ran had walked past the massive pit. He looked coldly at the building materials market. Ciao, Sheening, you dare threaten me? And you even found out my secret? Then I'm truly sorry, but I absolutely cannot allow my secret to be leaked. Xiao Ran raised his hand, pointing towards the building materials market. Haha, what's he doing? Is he trying to act tough with us? He thinks he's something special just because he has a few powers. Ciao Sheening is the boss around here. The crowd was extremely annoyed, feeling that Xiao Ran was far too arrogant. A few even flipped him the middle finger. Come and get us if you dare. They knew the building materials market was under Ciao Sheening's protection. If Xiao Ran dared to make a move inside the market, it would be a direct slap in Ciao Sheening's face, and Ciao Sheening would absolutely not stand idly by. Therefore, as long as they didn't leave the building materials market, they were perfectly safe. Xiao Ran smirked. I just love this defiant look of yours. A spatial gate opened. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Dozens of rockets simultaneously streaked towards the building materials market, exploding on impact. Xiao Ran had acquired a total of 17 rockets back at the camp, and now he unleashed them all in one go. After all, such weapons would become increasingly ineffective against the ever-stronger superhumans. And this building before him was full of trash, plenty of superhuman trash at that, making it the perfect target for a rocket barrage. In an instant, 17 rockets streaked towards the building materials market from various angles. Their tails spewed flames, resembling oversized fireworks. These rockets couldn't break the sound barrier, traveling at just over 100 meters per second, but that was still a speed difficult for the ordinary eye to track. How far was Xiao Ran from the building materials market? About 100 meters. So, it took less than a second for a rocket to travel from launch to impact. What did that mean? Most people wouldn't even register the rocket's appearance. They just perceive a flash of something bright streaking past, and then impact. But the superhumans all saw the rockets coming. After all, even if they weren't physical-type superhumans or didn't have enhanced vision, as long as they were superhumans, their physical capabilities far exceeded those of ordinary people. Especially those who had absorbed several abilities. Any one of them could spot the incoming rockets. But spotting them was one thing. Dodging them was another entirely. With less than a second, how many could react in time? Crash. Indeed, some reacted instantly, smashing through windows to escape, but they were a tiny minority. Most were caught completely off guard, like a sudden thunderclap, leaving no time to cover one's ears. Not because they didn't want to, but because there was no time. Get down! This was the cry of the second fastest reactors. Too late to jump out a window, so they hit the deck, try to minimize their chances of being hit. Boom, boom, boom. Then the rocket struck, triggering massive explosions. Vast plumes of smoke and dust billowed into the sky, accompanied by raging fires. The ground was littered with collapsed walls and rubble, along with copious amounts of blood, severed limbs, and injured people. A scene straight out of hell. As the instigator of this carnage, Xiao Ran remained utterly indifferent. His 2 prior observations had revealed only various thugs inside, not a single decent person among them. Even if there had been innocents, he wouldn't have hesitated to act, not when the secret of his over 3 billion in hoarded supplies was at stake. The crucial question was, Xiao Sheening, Su He, and the others. Were they dead? He turned to Jiang Yuning and mouthed some words without making a sound. Wait for me on the boat. Jiang Yuning clearly understood, nodding repeatedly at Xiao Ran, but her eyes were glazed, her spirit shaken. The scene before her was too overwhelming. Xiao Ran strode forward. As he passed Gao Bushwan, he unleashed a sonic stone, instantly shattering the earth shield Gao Bushwan had formed. Gao Bushwan's corpse was also blasted to pulp by the sonic stone. Ignoring the gruesome sight, Xiao Ran reached out and pressed his hand onto the remains, a warm current flowing into him. Such a large amount. Xiao Ran was startled. This is even more than Lu Yong. What had Lu Yong been doing all this time? To have muddled along for so long, and yet absorbed fewer abilities than some rich brat? No wonder Gao Bushwan had been so arrogant. Indeed, this amount was equivalent to about 20 abilities. He could definitely be considered strong. But before Xiao Ran, he hadn't even had a chance to display his strength, taken down in just 2 or 3 moves. 2 of his abilities underwent changes. The maximum range of his spatial perception increased to 86 meters, and his spatial cut to 79 meters. However, spatial gate and banishment remained unchanged. Were these latter 2 abilities fixed, no longer subject to change? Xiao Ran frowned slightly but didn't dwell on it, instead looking ahead. By now, many superhumans had gotten to their feet, glaring furiously at Xiao Ran. This madman, we didn't even freaking provoke you. Why attack us too? But remembering the terror of those dozen-plus rockets, none of them dared to be the first to step forward. Overwhelming strength was the best deterrent. Besides, what was their hurry? Wasn't Chiao Sheening the boss here? Xiao Ran! An incandescently furious roar echoed as Chiao Sheening, Wan Haichao, and Su He emerged from the rubble. Wan Haichao was holding up a section of a collapsed wall, acting as a human shield in front of Chiao Sheening and Su He. However, under such an onslaught, he too was covered in wounds, blood gushing freely. If this guy is a physical type, his strength is pretty pathetic, Xiao Ran mused. He glanced at Wan Haichao. The man gave off the impression of a physical type, but compared to a true one, he seemed to be lacking significantly. Therefore, his apparent specialty was likely a deception. Chiao Sheening was seething with uncontrollable rage. He had originally been a merchant in this building materials market, and a very successful one at that, which was why he'd chosen it as his stronghold. Now, it had been so easily destroyed. Get him! Kill him! He roared, waving his hands. From the ruins, many figures swayed unsteadily as they emerged. Xiao Ran's gaze swept over them. All these people had dull, vacant eyes like zombies. There were men and women, some even apparently seafood vendors from inside, thinly clad. Yet, exposed to such biting cold, none of them showed any sign of fear, instead moving one after another toward Xiao Ran. Abnormal. Very abnormal. Xiao Ran could see clearly that many of them were impaled by broken rebar, yet they seemed to feel no pain like marionettes. Marionettes? A thought struck Xiao Ran, and he looked back at Chiao Sheening. When they had first met, Chiao Sheening had been very eager to shake his hand. So, did his ability require physical contact to control people? Then, these zombies made perfect sense. They were all puppets controlled by Chiao Sheening. One individual's neck was even twisted at an angle that clearly indicated death, yet he still staggered towards Xiao Ran. How many such puppets were there? Over 200, meaning almost everyone in the entire market was under his control. Holy crap, this ability is terrifying, Xiao Ran thought. This Chiao Sheening had hidden his depths well. If Xiao Ran hadn't demolished his stronghold, he probably wouldn't have revealed his ability publicly. Still, Xiao Ran mused, you might have a lot of them, but they're nothing to me. Just then, the zombie-like figures began to run, their speed increasing rapidly, far exceeding that of a normal person. Crack, snap, pop. As they ran, snapping sounds came from their bones. Some even had muscles bursting open. Their bodies couldn't withstand such intensity. Muscles tore first, and even bones would break. It was grotesque, but if dead men could run, what was running until muscles tore and bones snapped in comparison? The other superhumans watched, breaking out in cold sweats. Were there truly any idiots who had survived this long in the apocalypse? Chiao Sheening was too ruthless to have unknowingly controlled so many puppets. And in the plaza before the building materials market, over 200 people charged towards Xiao Ran at a speed that would leave even a 100-meter sprint champion in the dust. Closer and closer. Xiao Ran sighed. These walking dead might pose a slight threat to other ability users, but to him, they were hardly worth a glance. Weren't they just serving themselves up on a platter? Since he'd already used his ability, he didn't bother hiding it anymore and directly opened a spatial gate in front of him. A scene that made everyone's scalps tingle unfolded. As these walking dead rushed toward Xiao Ran, they bizarrely vanished. Not a single one left. Ability users had danger sense, but did these puppets? Moreover, under Chao Sheening's control, they had no thoughts of their own, just blindly charged forward, so they disappeared in a neat and orderly fashion. What the hell kind of monster is he? Or rather, what kind of ability is that? It's too bizarre. First, it was a barrage of rockets, and now people are vanishing in a thin air. What ability could do this? The crowd murmured. Some were driven by a curiosity that could kill a cat. Others were confident in their own considerable strength, and the rest had unknown motives. In any case, not a single person fled. Chao Sheening's brows were deeply furrowed. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. I know where you've hidden those 3 billion plus worth of supplies, he thought to himself. The sudden disappearance of his subordinates just now gave him a flash of inspiration. Space. Xiao Ran must possess a massive pocket dimension. That's why he stored all the supplies inside it. That explained why the warehouse he rented was empty, and Xiao Ran's villa was so small it obviously couldn't hold that much. Who would have thought Xiao Ran had been carrying such a vast amount of supplies on his person all along? But if that's the case, does it mean he can't kill Xiao Ran? Not necessarily. As long as he could capture Xiao Ran. No, as long as he could get close enough to touch him. He could control Xiao Ran, just like he did with those 200-odd people earlier. Unfortunately, controlling those people had cost him a considerable amount of effort and time. Just then, many ability users emerged from various corners of the ruins and gathered around Chao Sheening. They were all ability users he had recruited. Some of them were under his control, while others were not. The obedient ones weren't controlled, but coercive measures had been used on those who weren't. Everyone listen up, Chao Sheening roared. That man in the distance is named Xiao Ran. His actions are demonic. He launched an indiscriminate attack against me, against us. Many of your comrades have met a terrible fate. I ask you, do you want revenge? If you do, then charge with me. Annihilate this brat. And I, Chao Sheening, will definitely not treat you unfairly. After he finished speaking, most people remained unmoved. Are you kidding? You think a few words from you will make us cannon fodder? We're not idiots. Besides, so what if comrades died? In these times, aren't comrades just meant to be sold out? Avenge them? Hilarious. Of course, this was mainly because Xiao Ran was too strong and his methods were incredibly bizarre, which had thoroughly intimidated them. Otherwise, who among them was a saint? You're Chao Sheening, one of the 5 major powers in Sioux City. You have so many elite subordinates. Do you really need us to back you up? This is your private affair. Deal with it yourself. You open the market, you collect the rent, but when it's time to fight to the death, you want to crowdfund it? You expect us to lay down our lives for a few empty promises? What happens if we die? Is there compensation? And even if there is, what good would it do me? I wouldn't be around to use it. Chao Sheening couldn't help but feel a bit awkward. He was a regional overlord, yet his words were met with no response, causing him to lose a great deal of face. Fine, since you all want to watch the show, and even wait to swoop in and pick up the scraps when both sides are battered, I'll let you suffer the consequences of your actions. I'll finish all of you off later. Spread out. Don't bunch up, he ordered his own men. Xiao Ran's ability is likely spatial, or at least he can project weapons from space. So, we absolutely cannot stay clustered together. Yes, sir, his subordinates nodded in unison. But before they could truly disperse, Xiao Ran struck again. What was it this time? Supersonic rebar. In an instant, a dense barrage of rebar shot out, and it wasn't just aimed at Chao Sheening and his men. Even the onlookers were included. This was, of course, not an accidental misfire on Xiao Ran's part, but a deliberate act. Did they think he didn't know what these people were scheming? It was clearly none of their business, so why insist on lingering here? Obviously, they wanted to see if there were any scraps to pick up. Xiao Ran wouldn't show mercy to such people. Besides, he hadn't seen any good people around. If there was collateral damage, so be it. They wouldn't be an innocent loss. Damn! Instantly, cries of alarm erupted, but that was all they could manage. Supersonic rebar was even faster than rockets. How many seconds to cover 100 meters? Less than 0. 3 seconds. Therefore, even some ability users couldn't react in time to even see the rebar appear, relying purely on their danger sense to instinctively dodge or use life-saving skills. Thud, 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 thud. The supersonic rebar carpeted the ground, densely embedded in the ruins. Instantly, a chorus of screams and wails filled the air. Want to dodge such a dense rain of rebar? Impossible, unless someone was absurdly fast and could run 50 meters in under 0.3 seconds, because Xiao Ran had covered an area of roughly 50 by 50 meters. Escaping this zone meant absolute safety. However, only a mere 3 people managed it. These 3 specialized in speed, 2 men and 1 woman. They glanced at Xiao Ran, shivering with lingering fear, then looked at the tragic scene, not daring to utter a peep, and quickly turned to flee. Xiao Ran didn't pursue them, as he still had his main target to eliminate. The remaining people, of course, couldn't escape the attack zone in time, so it came down to being lucky or unlucky. The lucky ones, though they hadn't escaped the attack zone, found that the rebar wasn't so dense as to leave no gaps. There were still some spaces, so if they happened to be standing in one of these gaps, they could luckily evade this volley. There were a total of 9 such lucky individuals. As for those hit by the attack, they were either killed outright or injured. Under the terrifying power of the supersonic rebar, even if ability users deployed defensive abilities, absolutely no one could withstand it. A mere touch from a rebar meant being pierced straight through. Hit in the leg, and a hole appeared in the leg. Hit in the torso, and a hole appeared in the torso. Hit in the hand, because hand were too small, and it was simply gone, reduced to a gory pulp. So those hit in vital spots dropped dead instantly. Those not hit in vital screamed and wailed incessantly. In total, there were still over 40 people alive. Of course, there were exceptions. For example, one Haichao. Xiao Ran saw it clearly. The burly man was in a terrible state, pierced by 2 rebars. Who asked him to be so large a target? But his chest, which clearly hadn't been directly hit, suddenly squirmed. Rip! It burst open, and then 2 hands reached out, pushed apart, followed by a head emerging. Holy crap! Did the burly man just give birth? No. Even if a burly man giving birth was outrageous enough, he wouldn't birth a 1-meter-tall baby that looked like a dwarf in his 30s, right? So, in reality, this dwarf had been hiding inside one Haichao's body all along. Shit, I get it now. Why one Haichao had people call him Tiange? It was because the dwarf inside him was Tiange. The dwarf emerged from one Haichao's body, covered in blood and gore. He shot Xiao Ran a look, his eyes filled with venomous hatred. He had almost died just now. This was the second time he'd faced death since the apocalypse. So, naturally, he hated Xiao Ran to the bone, but at the same time, he was consumed by fear. This man was unbelievably strong. How many evolved were here? In that single wave, he had wiped out at least 2/3 of them. Just ask, was there any other evolved in Sioux City who could do that? Forget one person. Even if 2 evolved factions went to war, could they achieve such terrifying destructive power in mere seconds? Him, go up against Xiao Ran? How would he dare? He looked towards Chao Sheening. This was their leader. Chao Sheening was in a terrible state too. Xiao Ran had given him special attention. 3 supersonic rebars were embedded in his body. To be pierced by such horrifying rebars. The entry wounds were small, just the thickness of the bars, but the exit wounds? They were as wide as bowls. Consequently, his left leg and right arm were completely useless, and a massive hole gaped in his left waist. He wasn't dead yet. Indeed, he wasn't, because Xiao Ran saw no blood, as if those 3 spots had no flesh and blood to begin with, as if they were naturally gaping holes. But what was even stranger was that Chao Sheening was walking forward. As he moved, the wounds actually expanded automatically. What? Chao Sheening's body seemed to turn liquid, parting around the rebars. He effortlessly pulled himself free from them, and the wounds healed rapidly, just like liquid. If you slash water with a knife, even if it's momentarily split, it immediately reforms. But Chao Sheening's body wasn't liquid. It was countless insects. That's right, his body was composed of insects. So, when encountering something like rebars, it could naturally disperse and then reassemble. It was a simple principle. If you plunged a rebar into a large swarm of ants on the ground, how many could you kill? A few dozen at most. But what were a few dozen ants compared to the entire colony? An insignificant number. Chao Sheening had fully recovered, but while his body could, his clothes couldn't. So, there were a total of 6 holes, front and back. In the extreme cold, he shivered slightly, but his anger and killing intent were even icy. Xiao Ran. He gritted his teeth, wishing he could devour the man before him alive. Just 2 attacks. The first, rocket launchers, had utterly destroyed the base he had painstakingly built. The second, those terrifying rebars, had decimated his men. He wasn't quite a lone wolf yet, but he wasn't far off. The blow to him was simply too great. I was still damn well figuring out how to take your riches, And you just went and destroyed my base and my men? Too ruthless. However, he was all bark and no bite. His ability was incredibly powerful. He could disperse himself into tens of thousands of insects. Therefore, he was largely immune to physical attacks. Forget rebars. Even if you smashed him with a boulder, he could transform into a swarm of flying insects and scatter. But he also had weaknesses. For instance, he feared fire and also cold. Especially in such extreme low temperatures, if he dispersed into countless insects, they would easily freeze to death. Damn it! If only he had managed to shake Xiao Ran's hand earlier, his puppet worms could have entered Xiao Ran's body and easily controlled him. But in the real world, there were no if-onlys. Xiao Ran. More people roared in anger. These were the evolved who had survived that wave of attacks. We were minding our own business and didn't provoke you. So why did you attack us too? You're too tyrannical. Yeah. Why did you attack us as well? Are you trying to provoke public outrage? These people shouted angrily, each one radiating killing intent. Those who could survive this onslaught were all experts. They either possessed powerful offensive abilities or formidable defenses. Weaker types, like Suhi, would have been wiped out instantly by such an attack. So, although their numbers had plummeted to just over 40 people, their overall combat strength hadn't actually diminished too much. Xiao Ran glanced at them and said calmly, "My apologies, friendly fire. Friendly fire, my ass. The scope of your friendly fire is way too large. And even if I believed you, is that how you apologize? Xiao Ran, if you don't want to force us to team up with Boss Chiao, compensate us immediately," one person shouted. Yes, compensate us, more people roared in unison. The dead were dead. They couldn't be brought back to life. So, demanding benefits was the smart move. This scene left even Xiao Ran a bit stunned. You people really value money over your lives. He burst out laughing. A bunch of morons. I just attacked all of you together. Do you really think I care if you team up or not? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Instantly, another wave of sonic stones shot toward them. Holy shit. Watching the sky full of stones rain down, everyone's faces turned green with fright. Stones moving at sonic speed. How terrifying would their destructive power be? At this stage, which evolved could possibly withstand that? Everyone, team up, or we'll all die. Chiao Sheening roared at the opportune moment, though inwardly he was sneering. Xiao Ran had actually helped him rally everyone. Thanks a lot. He directly controlled one of his subordinates to activate their ability. Giant. The puppet worms allowed him to completely control another person, transmitting commands with a single thought. The subordinate instantly grew, transforming into a giant over 10 meters tall. Stone form. The giant's skin instantly turned grayish-white, as if it had become stone. This was probably for the best. After he turned into a giant, his clothes didn't grow with him. This wasn't anime, after all. So, his appearance was inevitably a bit unseemly. The critical point was when proportionally enlarged his manhood dwarfed even an elephant's. Now that he was a stone man, at least he wouldn't make others feel inadequate by comparison. Bang, bang, bang. How fast were the sonic stones? The moment the giant appeared, the stones all smashed into it. With each impact, a dent appeared on the giant's body, sending stone fragments flying. If it had been anyone else, they would have long since given up and reverted to human form. But this evolved was already a puppet. Although the sensation of pain hadn't disappeared, it hurt so much his stone hair stood on end, his body wasn't under his own control, so he gritted his teeth and endured. But even he couldn't block all these sonic stones. In less than 2 seconds, he shattered completely. He turned into countless fragments of stone, scattering everywhere. But thanks to the time bought by the stone giant, everyone managed to gather around Xiao Sheening. They all attacked, working together to counter Xiao Ran's next assault. In that instant, all sorts of evolved abilities manifested. Ice and fire intertwined. Werewolves and bearmen roared, taking up the fight. This made Xiao Ran slightly surprised. Against the united efforts of so many evolved, his second wave of attacks had actually failed to achieve much. Oh right, he killed one stone man. Hey, this is a bit tricky. While Xiao Ran was musing, Xiao Sheening felt like his heart was bleeding. This Esper with the stone giant ability was someone he had incredibly high hopes for. The ability was excellent for both offense and defense, truly a rare find. He had even shared several of his own abilities to strengthen this subordinate. After all, with a man under his control, he had no fear of betrayal. But now, killed by Xiao Ran in a single exchange. Attack now. Don't let him keep hitting us. Xiao Sheening roared. As a competent leader, his mind was sharp. He didn't have another stone man subordinate. Unfortunately, it was too late. Xiao Ran's attack came again. More sonic stones, and even denser this time. We have to block it, everyone yelled, once again unleashing their unique powers to weather the storm. But one person broke from the group, closing in on Xiao Ran. A strong sense of crisis washed over Xiao Ran, and without hesitation, he used banishment on himself, the minimal version, to conserve as much power as possible. On the other hand, he was also afraid of banishing the danger along with himself. Wouldn't that just be shooting himself in the foot? A figure suddenly materialized behind him, slashing down with a knife. A cruel smile spread across the attacker's face. Your life and your ability. I'll be taking those. At such close range, Xiao Ran seemed to have no way to dodge the blow. This person's ability was stealth, allowing them to silently approach a target and deliver a fatal strike. Seeing this, the others were overjoyed, yet they also frowned. If this strike landed, Xiao Ran would surely die, but wouldn't his ability then be claimed by this assassin? Upon acquiring Xiao Ran's power, the assassin's strength would undoubtedly skyrocket. Who wouldn't be green with envy? However, with everyone tied up dealing with the terrifying rain of stones, no one could step forward to contest it. Yet, as the knife slashed through, the assassin, having used too much force, stumbled forward. His face was a mask of horrified disbelief. His strike had met only air, and his momentum carried him off balance. How is this possible? Wasn't Xiao Ran's ability spatial? If so, how could he have passed through like an illusion, causing the attack to miss? Could it be everything they were seeing was a lie? That there were no rocket strikes, no sonic stones attacking them? That it was all just their damn imagination? Sneak attacks from behind aren't very sporting, are they? Xiao Ran's voice sounded by the assassin's ear. Besides, how can civilized people go around swinging knives? We're not living in the Stone Age. Then, a submachine gun appeared in Xiao Ran's hands. You try to cut me with a knife? I'm definitely going to return the favor. Just taking you out with my powers wouldn't be satisfying enough, damn it. Rat-a-tat-tat. He squeezed the trigger, and a torrent of bullets erupted, the muzzle instantly glowing red-hot. The assassin's danger sense screamed warnings, but what good did it do? His ability was stealth, for closing in and striking unseen, but his own defenses were weak. His strength, agility, and speed were nothing special compared to other Espers of his level. How could he possibly dodge this hail of bullets? In an instant, his head exploded. What the hell? I use a knife, and you call me uncivilized, but you using a gun is civilized? That was his last indignant thought. Xiao Ran merely smiled faintly. Guns are a good 1,000 or 2 years more advanced than knives. Naturally, they're more civilized. And as for the rest of you, he shifted his gaze to Chao Sheening and his men. You can all hurry up and die. Boom. Another deluge of sonic stones rained down. Xiao Ran was truly out for blood, willing to expend all his trump cards to annihilate Chao Sheening's entire crew. Facing this fresh onslaught, Chao Sheening and his men were on the verge of despair. Xiao Ran's attacks seemed endless. Abilities were supposed to be finite. Each use drained them. How could he be inexhaustible? In fact, after just a few waves of Xiao Ran's assault, they had nearly depleted their own powers. Yet, here came another attack. How could they possibly block it? With their lives? We have to block it, even if it seems impossible. Otherwise, we're dead. Chao Sheening bellowed. His controlled subordinates once again lashed out with all their might. Several, due to overexerting their abilities, shifted into their secondary forms, no longer truly human. Witnessing this, the others could only grit their teeth and pour every last ounce of their strength into the defense. But no one noticed Chao Sheening shoot a meaningful glance at Tiange. Understanding immediately, Tiange lunged towards Chao Sheening. Chao Sheening's chest split open, allowing Tiange to merge inside, and then sealed shut. Instantly, Chao Sheening turned and bolted. The entire sequence was smooth and practiced. Astoundingly, he covered over 20 meters in a single bound. Tiange's ability was parasitism. Once merged, he could massively boost the host's strength, speed, and other attributes. Chao Sheening, already an Esper who had absorbed numerous abilities and undergone multiple physical enhancements, possessed a constitution 20 to 30 times that of an ordinary person, even if he wasn't a physical type specialist. With Tiange's augmentation, he was now easily on par with a physical type Esper of the same level. Even so, Chao Sheening had completely lost the nerve to face Xiao Ran. His only thought was escape. He'd even duped the others into fighting desperately, buying time for his, or rather their getaway. Holy crap, Chao Sheening, screw your entire family. That bastard. Someone caught sight of him fleeing out of the corner of their eye and, without a second thought, also turned to run. To hell with the overwhelming attacks. Self-preservation was all that mattered. They were already struggling to defend. Now, with several abandoning their posts, how could they possibly stop the sonic stones? Boom, boom, boom. The sonic stones swept across the ground, pulverizing any Esper caught in their path. Still, a few actually managed to escape. Xiao Ran gave chase immediately, continuing to launch sonic steel bars. Puffed, puffed, puffed. Guided by his spatial awareness, the sonic steel bars rarely missed, each one finding a target. Nevertheless, one person got away. Sheening. He was incredibly fast, moving like a physical-type Esper, his speed astonishing. But that wasn't the crucial part. The crucial part was that after he had covered a significant distance, 2 wings sprouted from his back. With a flap, he took to the sky. What the hell? If Sheening had just been running, Xiao Ran would have pursued him. Footprints in the snow. The larger the leap, the deeper the print due to the force exerted, made tracking physical-type Espers relatively easy. But this guy had actually freaking flown away. How was Xiao Ran supposed to chase him now? Where had Sheening's wings come from? They were made of insects. Sheening's body could no longer truly be called solid. It was entirely composed of insects, capable of morphing into any shape at will. So, forget wings. He could probably turn into a toilet if he wanted. Xiao Ran came to an abrupt halt. Xiao Ran's expression was grim. It wasn't that he regretted absorbing fewer abilities, but rather that Sheening knew too many of his secrets. Actually, the nature of his abilities was secondary. After all, as more time passed in this post-apocalyptic world, his abilities would eventually be exposed anyway. What he truly cared about was the over 3 billion worth of supplies he had hoarded. Combine that with his spatial ability, and anyone with half a brain could deduce he was storing the supplies in an alternate dimension. Over 3 billion in supplies. How many ambitious vultures would target him? How many self-righteous saints would preach at him, demanding he share his resources to save humanity? Damn it. Xiao Ran's thoughts raced. What would Sheening do after fleeing? He was definitely scared of him. His reluctance to fight earlier proved it. However, he surely wouldn't be able to resist the greed for over 3 billion in supplies. So, he had only one option: cooperate with others. Would it be one of the 5 major factions, or perhaps several? Fewer factions involved meant a larger share of the loot, but less security. More factions meant a smaller share, but greater safety. How would Sheening choose? If I were Sheening, I'd first go find Gao Yong. I killed Gao Yang's son, so naturally, Gao Yong wants me dead. Add the lure of over 3 billion in supplies, and they'd hit it off immediately. However, Sheening is all alone now. Even if Gao Yong agrees to cooperate, he'd have to be wary of Gao Yong backstabbing him, or even devouring him whole once the deed is done. But they probably wouldn't resort to infighting before they take me down. Sheening only knows my address at 9 Fortunes residential area. He has no idea about Azure Rainbow Tower or Clearwind Garden. On the other hand, I know Gao Yang's faction is based at the gas group in the industrial park. So, they're in the open, and I'm in the shadows. The only worry is if Sheening doesn't go to Gao Yong, or even if he does, it might be several days from now. It's getting late today, and I need to restock my sonic stones and sonic rebar. I'll go find Gao Yong tomorrow. Back to Clearwind Garden. Before heading back, Xiao Ran naturally went through all the ability users. Those not dead received a finishing blow. This time, he'd hit the jackpot, absorbing around 152 units of ability energy, twice the total amount he'd absorbed before. Instantly, the maximum range of his spatial cut increased to 100 meters. Wait, that didn't seem right. If 1 unit of ability energy equated to 1 meter of range, it should have been over 200 meters. So, had this skill hit its cap? Just 100 meters? Xiao Ran frowned. He'd been dreaming of lounging at home while his spatial cut lopped off the head of some bastard from the States. A pity, a real pity. As for spatial gate and banishment, no change at all. Well, not entirely no change. For instance, banishment's duration had increased slightly. He could now maintain it for about 7 minutes. Only spatial sense was still improving steadily. Its maximum detection range had reached an astounding 238 meters. If it increased a few more times, reaching over a kilometer, the fog would no longer be able to trap Xiao Ran. He could go wherever he pleased, even in the dead of night. What if it could reach several hundred kilometers? That would be more badass than any radar or satellite. Wait, he felt a new, budding sensation within him. A new ability. Not surprising. After absorbing over 100 units of ability energy at once, it would be strange if he didn't awaken another ability. Moreover, this budding sensation grew stronger, reaching the point of bursting forth in what felt like an instant. With enough ability energy, a 10-month gestation could be shortened to a minute. Here it comes. Xiao Ran was a bit stunned. What was this new ability? Compression? He flipped his hand, a steel ball already in his palm. He held his palm out flat, and suddenly, the steel ball shot forward like a chambered bullet. Why did that happen? Because he had compressed the air behind the steel ball, then suddenly released it, but only on one side. The expanding air then propelled the steel ball forward like a bullet at nearly the speed of one. So, this ability lets me churn out handmade bullets? If that was all, this ability would be pretty useless. At best, it would have the stopping power of a handgun. But nowadays, even sniper bullets struggled to harm ability users. What was the point of such handmade bullets, other than perhaps overwhelming with quantity? No, of course not. Xiao Ran looked at the snowdrift ahead and activated his ability. A large amount of snow, as if pushed by a pair of invisible giant hands, gathered towards the center. The snow was forcibly compressed into a thick block of ice, turning from white to transparent, and then, with a crack, it instantly shattered. This couldn't really demonstrate the true power of spatial compression. Xiao Ran then looked at some rebar not far away and activated his ability again. A terrifying sight followed. The rebar actually bent. This was a freaking compressor. Xiao Ran grinned. Spatial compression and spatial cut actually had similarities, but their effects were polar opposites. Spatial cut wielded much less raw power, but could bypass defenses and act directly inside the target. Thus, it required very little force to kill and could even be used for non-invasive surgery. It was mainly for precision strikes. Spatial compression was the exact opposite. It was simple, crude, and directly crushed targets with brute force. Spatial cut requires locking onto a target for a precise strike, but spatial compression doesn't. Even if an enemy's attack comes at me, I can compress it, crush it outright. It complemented spatial cut perfectly. And I can actually compress air, throw it at an enemy, and then release it. That's an air bomb. How awesome an air bomb would be dependent on how much the air could be compressed. Obviously, the stronger his ability, the higher the compression, and the more terrifying the air bomb. Also, if I'm in an enclosed space and suddenly compress all the air into one point or corner, would the people inside die from lack of oxygen? Or at least pass out? No, wait. It might cause an internal-external pressure imbalance and make them just explode. Too strong. This ability was too strong, and it had huge potential for development. So many ways to use it. Xiao Ran grinned, extremely pleased. As for its range, it could be used with 360-degree control over the compression direction, but its effective reach was limited to 30 meters in front of him. As for its actual power, bending rebar was definitely not its limit. Damn, I'm so strong. It seems. People knowing he had over 3 billion in supplies wasn't entirely a bad thing. Sure, it would be a bit annoying, but it could also deliver abilities to him. Most importantly, did anyone know Xiao Ran's true residence? No. Even if someone could still communicate with satellites now, could they even photograph him through this thick cloud cover? So, who could possibly find Clearwind Garden? His secrets being known definitely irked him, but with transportation disrupted and information flow choked, the actual impact wouldn't be that significant. Alright, I guess I can only console myself with that. Xiao Ran boarded the hovercraft and piloted it back. After a while, he sensed something was off. It was too quiet. So quiet, he almost thought he was the only one in the cabin. He looked at Jiang Yuning and saw the beautiful officer staring blankly, as if stupefied. He had been thoroughly annoyed about failing to kill Chao Sheening, but seeing her state, he was amused. He waved a hand in front of her face. What's wrong, Officer Jiang? Only then did Jiang Yuning snap out of it, as if waking from a dream. She let out a long breath and said, I thought I understood you, knew how formidable you were. Only today did I realize I was wrong. This man wasn't just formidable, he was terrifying. A single person had, in just 2 encounters, completely routed several hundred enemies, with only 5 managing to escape. If word of this got out, would anyone even believe it? Xiao Ran deliberately let out a hum and grinned. Just how capable I am. Shouldn't Officer Jiang have known that already? Still in shock, Jiang Yuning didn't catch his innuendo. However, the side effects of absorbing abilities were starting to kick in. Xiao Ran looked at the beautiful, delicate policewoman, chuckled suggestively, and stopped the boat. Let me check on how you're progressing with what Bai Rui and the others taught you. Huh, didn't you just check yesterday? MMPH. Xiao Ran continued to pilot the boat. However, even with that small delay, the sky had already darkened, and a dense fog rolled in. Fortunately, his spatial perception had reached 238 meters. Although it took some effort and slowed him down, he still made it back to Qingfeng Garden before 7 o'clock. Xiao Ran didn't mention what had happened that day, but Jiang Yuning's grave expression gave her away, and the other women managed to coax the story out of her. Naturally, this left them all in shock as well. "Brother, you're so amazing. I love you to death." Zhou Yunsu was the first to rush over, throwing herself into Xiao Ran's arms. Xiao Ran smiled. What was so shocking about it? If abilities had ranks, then spatial ability was definitely S rank, the absolute highest tier, no contest. Well, unless there were time attribute abilities. Previously, Xiao Ran had always been cautious, partly because he'd had too few encounters with so-called experts and had no real idea of his own strength, and partly because he hadn't yet developed his two super offensive techniques, Sonic Stones and Sonic Rebar. Things like Kinetic Rebar were clearly much weaker. They were useless against physical-type combatants and easily neutralized even by other ability users. But after obliterating Lu Yong, Xiao Ran finally had a clear understanding of his own power. So I'm this strong. And now, his abilities were increasing, and their power was growing. Failing to kill Chiao, Sheening, and letting him escape will most likely expose my secrets. While that's annoying, it actually has its benefits. In the future, those ability users will come to me willingly. As long as I wait at Jiufu residential area, ability users might just deliver themselves to my doorstep every day, fueling my growing power. Well, that's one way to look at it. Thinking this, his mood indeed improved considerably. He was the family's pillar of strength. Once his mood lifted, his calm and composed demeanor, as if he could shoulder the heavens if they fell, naturally infected and influenced the others. The atmosphere immediately became lively, and everyone chatted and laughed, all worries vanishing. The night passed uneventfully. After daybreak, Xiao Ran first checked on Xiao. As expected, the energy intensity within her body had risen another level, but it would still take 2 or 3 days for a seed to form in her head. After breakfast, Xiao Ran headed to Hope Camp. After today, and then tomorrow, the patients here should be discharged. Xiao Ran was actually considering bringing these nurses back to Qingfeng Garden. Don't get the wrong idea. It wasn't because he was interested in them. Rather, they could handle daily chores like cleaning, and if anyone fell ill, they would be useful. After all, nurses had a certain level of proficiency with medications and were probably more skilled than doctors at giving injections or setting up for drips. Besides, feeding a few more mouths wouldn't strain their resources. There were slightly more people today, 21 in total. The outcome was 19 survivors and 2 deaths, but no new ability users emerged. No matter, the odds were pitifully low anyway. Xiao Ran left some more supplies and then returned to Qingfeng Garden. He restocked some Sonic Stones and Sonic Rebar, then went to have lunch. With the advent of his divine skill, Banishment, he was naturally much more confident and daring, because even if he made a mistake, he could pull himself back from the brink of death. However, as his ability strength increased, his control, focus, and acuity had also greatly improved, and surprisingly, he made no errors. Then, he set off towards the industrial park. He was going to Gao Yang's place to see if Chiao Sheening had sought him out. If he had, Xiao Ran would strike immediately. If not, he would strike immediately too. If Chiao Sheening planned to hide for a couple of days before looking for Gao Yong, only to arrive and find that place also in ruins. One could only imagine his utter dismay. Because this trip was specifically for a fight, Xiao Ran didn't bring any of the women, lest they be captured and used as hostages. However, this also had a downside. What if Xiao Ran absorbed another ability? The probability of that wasn't exactly high, but it was at least 99%, right? You just have to play it by ear. 3-legged toads might be hard to find, but there was no shortage of 2-legged women, and he had an astonishing abundance of supplies. Over 2 hours later, Xiao Ran arrived 2 kilometers outside the Industrial Parks Gas Corporation. He didn't want to be spotted prematurely and have his plan ruined. Xiao Ran was dressed in white from head to toe. In this environment, it actually provided excellent camouflage. He approached stealthily, covering the 2 kilometers in about 10 minutes. He could have been faster, but there was no need. This gas company was huge. It supplied both piped natural gas and bottled gas. So, it was essentially a powder keg. For instance, if a rocket or a sonic rebar hit a gas storage tank, the resulting explosion. TSK. Therefore, to the north of the gas corporation was Yangchang Lake, and to the east, west, and south were green zones, all designed to minimize damage in case of an accident. Still, to build your lair in a gas company after the apocalypse. That took some serious nerve. Weren't they afraid a single rocket would teach them a harsh lesson? Oh wait, it would teach them how to be ghosts. Xiao Ran didn't barge in recklessly. Even with his banishment divine skill, there was no need to needlessly put himself in danger. He found a high vantage point, took out his binoculars, and began to observe. Beyond the wall, gas tanks were everywhere. They were enormous, at least 10 stories high, with an astonishing circumference, actually resembling grain silos. Besides these tanks, a few scattered buildings were around, including employee dormitories and office buildings. However, the place was deserted, not a soul in sight. Was it too cold, so everyone was hiding indoors? No, that couldn't be it. If I were in charge here, no matter how cold, I'd have patrols and sentries posted in high places, even if it meant more frequent shift changes. You see, this gas company, while a gold mine, was also a powder keg. Weren't they afraid some fire ability user might show up, detonate the tanks, and turn this place into an inferno? No, you wouldn't even need a fire ability user. Even an ordinary person with an RPG, firing one shot at a tank, would instantly turn this place into a sea of fire with continuous explosions. What ability user could survive such an impact? Apart from abilities granting absolute immunity like banishment, other powers would probably be useless. At least at this current stage, ability users likely weren't strong enough to withstand an explosion of this magnitude. So, is this actually a trap set for me? Xiao Ran muttered to himself. Chiao Sheening found Gao Yong yesterday. Did those two old foxes conspire to sacrifice a gas company just to blow me up? But wouldn't they covet the supplies in my spatial storage? It was worth over 3 billion before the apocalypse, and now its value is immeasurable. Would those two really be willing to give that up? Xiao Ran found it incredible. Unless they think I'm too dangerous, impossible to control, so they'd rather kill me. Besides, I dismantled one of their bases and slaughtered most of his men, and the other son died at my hands. Naturally, they'd hate me to the bone. So, they do have reasons to want me dead. Hey, if that's the case. Xiao Ran gave a faint smile, his spatial perception already locked onto a gas tank. Fire. Swoosh. Several sonic speed steel rebars shot out. He was about 500 meters from the target, so it took less than 2 seconds for the sonic speed rebars to reach it. Not enough time for gravity to pull them down even a few meters. Thus, all 7 rebars hit the upper part of the tank. Twek, twek, twek. The rebars, carrying immense kinetic energy, pierced through. Intense friction sent sparks flying. Explode. Huh. Xiao Ran paused, because no explosion occurred. Why not? Oh. Xiao Ran nodded. This gas tank must be empty. Without gas, even with sparks, could it ignite or explode? Obviously not. Try another one. Twek, twek, twek. More sonic speed rebars shot out, and then silence. What the hell? Xiao Ran was quite embarrassed. He continued, I don't believe you could have used up all the gas in an entire gas company. However, he pierced all the gas tanks but failed to detonate a single one. So, it was clear they were all empty tanks. So, this isn't a trap for me, but that old fox Gao Yong fled overnight. No way. You haven't even met me. How could you be such a coward? Xiao Ran was speechless. He had thought Gao Yong was ruthless enough to forego the supplies in his hands just to kill him. But what was the result? Skipping town overnight? How can you be a leader if you're this cowardly? Xiao Ran walked into the gas company. Under his spatial perception, nothing could hide. He just took a look around and had already grasped the entire situation within the gas company. Indeed, it was completely empty, and even the gas canisters had been cleared out. They truly moved out overnight, not leaving a single thing behind. It wasn't entirely without discovery, though. Behind the company, on the side facing the lake, he found a large number of bodies. Mostly women. Their clothes were disheveled, some even naked. Most hadn't frozen to death, but were frozen solid after dying, preserving their state at the time of death. So, these were women abused by Gao Yong and his group. When they got tired of them, or even played them to death, they were just discarded here. Those not already dead would have quickly frozen. This was the bloody reality of the apocalypse. The strong preying on the weak, displayed in its starkest form. But why were there a few male corpses too? Xiao Ran observed them and found about 14 male bodies, a small number compared to the hundreds of female corpses. However, these male bodies shared a common characteristic. They looked as if they had been drained dry, emaciated, nothing but skin and bones. So, was there a succubus-like woman in Gao Yang's group of ability users who drained life essence? Xiao Ran took another look around before leaving. He deployed his hovercraft and headed towards Nine Fortunes' residential area. Old Gao, Aren't you being a bit too cautious? Chiao Sheening said. He was currently on a tall building a full 3 kilometers away from the gas company, watching everything there through high-power binoculars. Naturally, he had seen Xiao Ran enter and then leave. Cautious, a middle-aged man in his 50s snorted, his triangular eyebrows twitching. You commanded a powerful force, even had ability users from all over assisting you, and what happened? Didn't that bastard destroy your foundation in a single day? When dealing with someone like him, you can never be too careful. This was Gao Yong, Gao Bushwan's father. Before the apocalypse, he was a powerful figure in Sioux City. Unexpectedly, he awakened an ability after the apocalypse. Although the number of people he could command had greatly decreased, he now dared to do many things he wouldn't have dared before. Utterly unrestrained, because this was the apocalypse, and with his formidable strength, he could do whatever he pleased. However, years as an official had instilled in him a habit of caution. Yesterday, when Chiao Sheening came to him and told him his only son had been murdered, he was naturally furious and wanted to seek revenge on Xiao Ran immediately. But when Chiao Sheening mentioned that the building materials market had been destroyed by Xiao Ran, he instantly changed his mind. That very night, he had his men pack up everything that needed to be moved. Early this morning, everyone evacuated with their belongings, leaving only an empty shell for Xiao Ran. Just as expected, Xiao Ran had come. Chiao Sheening fell silent. Then, after a moment, said, "Yesterday's battle. I didn't understand that guy's abilities, and he stunned me with rocket launchers right at the start. If I could do it over, I wouldn't lose. So, don't be a coward either. Now that we know what cards Xiao Ran holds, let's just go for it." Gao Yong shot him a contemptuous look. "How many ability users did you lose yesterday?" 100, maybe 200, Chiao Sheening estimated. Gao Yong scoffed. That bastard absorbed so many abilities. How could his strength not have surged? He might even have new powers. No, he definitely has new powers. Little Chiao, you've already suffered a huge loss once. How have you not learned your lesson? What an idiot. Faced with Gao Yang's reprimand, Chiao Sheening could only manage an awkward smile, not daring to retort. He was here to ask Gao Yong for cooperation. Moreover, though it was called cooperation, he was all alone now. No men, no resources. Even if Gao Yong agreed, would they truly be equals? Impossible. So, old Gao could talk freely, even call him Little Chiao, while Little Chiao could only listen obediently. How times have changed. At this thought, he couldn't help but hate Xiao Ran to his core. Just let it go like that, he said, unwilling to accept it. Don't forget, he has over 3 billion in supplies. Right now, those supplies could probably form a mountain, enough for us to live off for hundreds of lifetimes. Gao Yong snorted. Don't we already know where he lives? That safe house, renovated for 80 million. Are you willing to just throw it away? The situation now is, we're in the shadows, and Xiao Ran is in the open. As the old saying goes, you can't guard against a thief for 1,000 days. So, as long as we have enough patience, we'll definitely find that bastard's weakness and send him on his way. His expression suddenly turned incredibly grim. His only son had died at Xiao Ran's hands. Naturally, he wished he could tear Xiao Ran limb from limb. However, compared to his own life, he naturally chose caution. Xiao Ran had to be killed, and his supplies had to be obtained, but he couldn't get himself caught in the process. So what do we do now? Chiao Sheening asked. He had no men to command and didn't dare face Xiao Ran directly, so he had no choice but to let Gao Yong take the lead. Gao Yong looked at the spot where Xiao Ran had disappeared, his voice chilling. Didn't that guy use a rocket launcher to blow up your construction materials market? We'll give him a taste of his own medicine and use rocket launchers to blow up his place too. If one rocket doesn't do it, then 2 or 3. Is it really that hard to get munitions these days? Even if we can't get them, making our own explosives isn't too difficult. The old man's sinister expression sent a shiver down Chiao Sheening's spine. Was teaming up with him like asking a tiger for its skin? No, he had to have a backup plan. Ideally, he could plant a puppet worm in the old man and control him completely. But even if Gao Yong didn't know about his abilities, his natural caution meant he never gave Chiao Sheening any chance to get close. They were never less than 2 meters apart. Haha, then I'll just control your subordinates and turn you into a general without an army. If you blow up Xiao Ran's villa, aren't you afraid you'll kill him too and never get those supplies? Gao Yong burst out laughing. Compared to greed, I fear death more. That bastard can easily destroy everything you have. He's terrifying. So, killing him is the main objective. Those supplies? They're just a bonus. This man was clear-headed, never blinded by greed. Faced with such a timid and cautious person, What could Sheening do but curse him inwardly as a coward? Xiao Ran arrived at the Jufu residential area. And what a coincidence! As he entered the complex, he happened to see a group of people also entering, heading straight for his villa. Huh, were these the strangers by Rue and the others had mentioned? The ones who wanted to trick them into opening the door and take over everything? Just then, the group walked over. To dare come out alone in this environment, you must be a powered individual, right? One of them said to Xiao Ran. There was no need to shout. Everything was deathly still, with hardly a sound in the surroundings. Even a whisper could travel far. To Xiao Ran's surprise, the speaker was a woman, around 30, with ordinary looks, wearing sunglasses, and her figure was completely hidden. She was wearing too many clothes. Being the only woman among so many men made her stand out. She must be a powered individual too, he figured. Otherwise, the others wouldn't all fall silent, and didn't even dare make a peep the moment she stopped speaking. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. So what if I am? The woman smiled too. My name is Li Xinyue, from the Xiaoyangshan Hot Spring Hotel. My boss is Wei Liy, Sister Wei. You must have heard of her, right? If you told me a few days ago, I really wouldn't have known who Wei Liy was. Xiao Ran remained impassive. I've heard of her. Good that you've heard. Li Xinyue chuckled. Our hotel is currently recruiting especially powered individuals. Join us, and you'll receive treatment beyond your wildest dreams. First, you'll get a warm place to stay. Second, you'll never have to worry about food or drink again. Third, you're a man. Hee, we have plenty of beauties there, guaranteed to send you to Cloud 9. For a woman to say that last part, it was utterly bizarre. Xiao Ran shook his head. Not interested. Li Xinyue's face darkened. Are you choosing the hard way after refusing a polite offer? Oh ho, can't hold it in anymore. Ready to show your true colors? Xiao Ran said calmly. What? You don't allow refusals. Not allowed. Li Xinyue enunciated each word. Ordinary people didn't matter. They couldn't care less about them. But powered individuals were different. Each one was like an energy pack. Kill them, and you could absorb their powers. This fated powered individuals to rarely get along. Unless a powerful force kept them in check, they were bound to fight to the death. Was Li Xinyue's invitation for Xiao Ran to join her faction genuine? Of course not. She just wanted to lure Xiao Ran back to the hotel, where her group could easily kill him together. That was her idea of being cautious. But Xiao Ran didn't take the bait, so she had to do it herself. She waved her hand, and her subordinates immediately fanned out, surrounding Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran chuckled, feeling a mix of emotions. Which of Sioux City's 5 major factions hadn't he made an enemy of by now? Only boss Luo of Xiangqing District remained. Seeing her men in position, Li Xinyue sneered. Get him! Instantly, her subordinates all drew their guns. Swish, 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 bullets flew. But it wasn't her men who fired. Xiao Ran attacked first. He opened a spatial gate to his left, unleashed a volley, then opened another to his right, and fired again. The entire process took less than 0.01 seconds, so it looked like both volleys were fired simultaneously. Bang, bang, bang. 14 of the 15 men fell almost at the same instant. Only one was an exception, because he was standing next to Li Xinyue. In that split second, Li Xinyue shot out her hand and actually caught the bullet aimed at him. Li Xinyue opened her hand, and the bullet dropped to the ground. The gleaming brass bullet had been crushed flat. Only then did the sole survivor react, trembling uncontrollably, frozen in place, utterly terrified. Looking at Li Xinyue, her entire right hand had turned a golden yellow, as if cast from brass. Not gold. Gold would be brighter. The woman looked at Xiao Ran in astonishment. What kind of power is that, to fire so many bullets at once? And I didn't even hear any gunshots. Strange, very strange. Her face showed only curiosity, no fear or apprehension. Clearly, she was extremely confident in her own strength to be so composed. After all, when prepared, how many powered individuals these days were afraid of guns? Xiao Ran pointed his finger at Li Xinyue. Bang! He mimicked the sound of a gunshot, and instantly, a volley of bullets shot towards Li Xinyue. After acquiring the Sonic Stone and Sonic Rebar, bullets were no longer a threat to Xiao Ran. He could even form bullets with his bare hands now. Clang, 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 clang. The bullets struck Li Xinyue, merely tearing through her clothes, but they couldn't penetrate her skin upon contact. And it was clear from her face, neck, and hands that her skin had turned completely brass-colored. So, your ability is to turn into brass. Xiao Ran muttered. Close enough. Li Xinyue, who had overheard him, opened her mouth, revealing that her tongue and teeth had also turned brass-colored. My ability is simple. I turn my body into brass, gaining terrifying strength and speed. Give up. Your attacks are useless against me, she declared, her voice laced with arrogance and disdain. Among ability users, even if they have the exact same ability, let alone differences in attributes, it still depends on whether you've absorbed abilities and how many portions you've absorbed. Take her, for example. She's absorbed a full 21 portions of abilities. While she couldn't be considered the equivalent of 22 ability users working together, if she were to fight 22 of them, she would definitely win. Because could 22 separate ability users truly unleash their full potential in concert? How much practice and coordination would that require? But an individual is different. When they go all out, they can unleash their entire power. You dare attack me? You got some nerve, rookie. Li Xingyue advanced on Xiao Ran step by step, bullets clinking and falling off her body in droves. In her eyes, Xiao Ran was likely a newly awakened ability user who thought he was hot stuff, looking down on everyone. She was about to teach this guy a lesson. If she'd known he was just a rookie, she wouldn't have bothered with the deception. A direct attack would have saved her some trouble. Rookie, Xiao Ran chuckled. Then try this. The hand he'd been pointing at Li Xingyue suddenly flipped and clenched, his spatial compression ability activated. Li Xingyue gasped, realizing with a shock that she couldn't move. One foot was raised, but she couldn't put it down, no matter how she tried. It was as if she'd been welded in place. No, that wasn't it. She immediately felt an intense pressure, a sensation that she found hard to believe. Because she was currently metallized, from head to toe, inside and out, it could be said that she had no weaknesses, no vital spots. Unless someone used extremely low temperatures to make her brittle and lifeless, then shattered her into brass slag with a powerful blow, or melted her down in a molten brass with incredibly high heat, she was effectively immortal. The crucial point was, she had absorbed a full 21 portions of abilities. To freeze or melt her, one would need at least 25 or even 30 portions, right? Otherwise, wouldn't that just be ridiculous? So, for her to actually feel such intense pressure was truly incredible, wasn't it? How much force would it take to make even her brass body feel it? What exactly is your ability? Li Xingyue finally panicked, her voice filled with terror. Take a guess, Xiao Ran chuckled, continuing to intensify the spatial compression. This move was all about brute force making miracles happen. In a word, overwhelming. Under the terrifying compressive force, Li Xingyue's body was actually being crushed flat, as if she'd been put under a hydraulic press. No, no, Li Xingyue shrieked in terror. Spare me, spare me. This wasn't some rookie. This was clearly an expert among experts, deliberately pretending to be weak to lure her in. Xiao Ran remained unmoved. Li Xingyue had clearly wanted to take his ability. Now that she couldn't win, she was begging for mercy? This wasn't before the apocalypse. Did he need to worry about some princess writing a hit piece on him? He increased the pressure. Crack, crunch, creak. Unsettling sounds of metal fracturing came from Li Xingyue's body. She was getting flatter and flatter. Spare bang. Before she could finish, her entire body shattered into countless pieces of brass. Dead, naturally. She wasn't a liquid metal robot, after all. Xiao Ran walked over and placed a hand on the remains. A warm current flowed into him. Confirmed. Definitely dead. Xiao Ran lowered his left hand. He had been ready to activate spatial compression at any moment, but after absorbing the warm current, it was no longer necessary. Then, he turned his gaze to the last person remaining, the lucky one Li Xingyue had saved. This person had already been trembling in fear, and now they looked completely shell-shocked, their eyes unfocused. Relax, I won't kill you, Xiao Ran said with a smile. I have a strange quirk. I only strike once. If I don't kill you in that one attempt, consider yourself lucky. You get to live. These words immediately made the person shudder, a spark of life returning to their eyes. Oh, really? Of course it was a lie. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. Of course it's true. Come on, come over to my place for a bit. He took the person to his villa, and then locked them in a room on the 3rd floor. This way, if someone comes by and finds a person in the villa, they'll probably assume it's me, Xiao Ran mused. If Gao Yong or some other faction of ability users couldn't even detect whether there was a living person in a villa, then that faction would be utterly useless. This is bait. I'll go set up an ambush elsewhere. Trying to screw me over, huh? Let's see who's the real sly fox. Xiao Ran left the villa and scouted the nearby area. To his surprise, he found a few residential complexes that still had survivors, though he had no idea how they'd managed to hold out for so long. He picked a woman who looked decent enough, and with food as payment, easily had his way with her. However, after they were done, she and her man actually tried to kill Xiao Ran. The result: Xiao Ran didn't kill them. He just sprayed them with some water melted from the toxic hailstones. If they managed to awaken as ability users, they would have contributed to Xiao Ran in a way. If it didn't succeed, he wouldn't have lost anything either. Then he returned to the Jiufu residential complex, scouted around a bit. There were plenty of empty apartments anyway, and picked a room that overlooked his own villa. After making sure it was warm enough, he began to wait patiently. He was confident someone would take the bait. It was just uncertain whether it would be today, tomorrow, or some other day. Xiao Ran wasn't worried at all. It was the apocalypse. What else was there to be busy with? He had already gathered plenty of supplies, and enough fuel to last several years. There was no need for him to rush around every day. Just one day. Tomorrow, I still have to go to Hope Camp to deal with the last batch of patients. Plus, Xiao Chiao is nearing her final moment. I need to be there for her. I wonder if she'll awaken an ability. Old Gao, you'd better not disappoint me, Xiao Ran chuckled, then took out his phone and started reading a novel. It was one he'd downloaded before the apocalypse, and, of course, it was a completed series. Unfinished ones would undoubtedly be forever on hiatus, their authors doomed to be eternal eunuchs. Though I despise authors who drop their series, I'll let it slide this time. After all, it was a natural disaster, a force majeure. Before he knew it, it was almost 5 o'clock. The already overcast sky had grown even gloomier. Just when Xiao Ran thought the enemy wouldn't show up today, his spatial sense detected a group of people stealthily approaching. Every one of them carried a bulging bag on their back, and they moved furtively, clearly up to no good. They're here. Xiao Ran instantly perked up, his spatial sense tracking their movements. There were 11 people in this group. They stopped, apparently discussing something. Unfortunately, his spatial sense could only see, not hear. Why can't spatial perception hear? Aren't spoken words also within this space? Is it because I'm not using it correctly? Xiao Ran couldn't help but wonder. Meanwhile, near the villa, the group of 11 was discussing. Old Jean, take a listen. Is the target inside? One of them asked. Old Jean nodded, cupping his ear as if listening intently. His ability was enhanced hearing. It had no offensive power, but was an excellent support skill. Yes, just one, Old Jean replied. Just one? Male or female? Is it Xiao Ran? The first man asked again. He and Old Jean were the only two ability users in their group. Old Jean rolled his eyes. First, I can only hear. How the hell am I supposed to tell if it's a man or a woman by listening? Second, I've never even seen this Xiao Ran. Even if I could somehow discern someone's appearance through sound, how would I know if it's him? The other ability user was left speechless by his retort. It's probably him, he said. Whatever. Our orders are to blow this place up. Let's go plant the explosives. The group moved forward cautiously. They already knew Xiao Ran was an ability user, and who would dare underestimate an ability user? Xiao Ran smirked, and a spatial gate opened. He'd gotten quite skilled with it, although it could only extend 10 meters from his body. If opened horizontally, it could stretch forward 50 meters, instantly appearing right in front of the 11 men. Then swish, 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 bullets sprayed out. Danger! Old Jean and the other man shouted simultaneously. But shouting was one thing. Old Jin's reflexes weren't much better than an ordinary person's. His ability was hearing, and his physical constitution was only slightly better than average. What would he do against bullets? The other man, however, reacted swiftly. He grabbed Old Jean and thrust his right hand forward. An ice wall materialized out of thin air. Rat-tat-tat. Bullets flew. The 9 ordinary men were all hit and fell, but the bullets aimed at him and Old Jean were blocked by the ice wall. So you were inside, he sneered. The attack had come from the front, the direction of the villa. Connecting this to Xiao Ran's space-related ability, it was clear their target was in the villa and had launched a surprise attack upon detecting their approach. What a despicable sneak. He unslung his backpack, revealing a homemade explosive pack, complete with a timer. He threw the pack out and activated the countdown, but he didn't flee immediately. Instead, he took the backpacks from the dead men and threw them all out too. They also contained explosives. He didn't need to worry about them individually. If one went off, the others would follow. All the while, bullets rained down. He neither dodged nor fled, simply using the ice wall to protect himself and Old Jean while efficiently tossing all the explosive packs to the corner of the villa. Only then did he retreat with Old Jean under cover. After they had retreated some distance, the gunfire stopped. They couldn't be hit anymore. A wall was in the way. 9, 8, 7. He counted down. 0. Boom. A massive explosion thundered, shaking the earth. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky. However, old Jean and his companion were dumbfounded. The villa was completely undamaged. Well, not completely undamaged. Some bricks had fallen off, but beneath the facade was a metal wall without a single dent. What the hell? This bastard actually built his turtle shell this thick. The two were stunned. Procedurally, they should have completed the mission. They had successfully detonated the explosives. But the result was bullshit. Who the hell fortifies their house like this? Does he really want to live like a turtle in its shell? What now? They looked at each other. Neither of their abilities could breach an iron wall that even explosives couldn't handle. They had no choice but to say to each other, retreat. Swish, swish, swish. Several steel rebars shot towards them at astonishing speed. Xiao Ran himself was a bit surprised. Jiao Ying had really used top-quality materials. He wasn't bluffing. This alloy wall truly couldn't be destroyed by explosives, at least not by this amount. His plan had been to let these two blow up the villa. Then, upon seeing a mangled corpse inside, Chiao, Sheening, and Gao Yong would assume he'd been killed in the blast. That way, those two would naturally show themselves, and he could then eliminate them. But old Jiao Ying hadn't cut any corners at all. He built a genuinely secure safe house, leaving Xiao Ran a bit speechless. He couldn't fool those two anymore, but he couldn't let these two escape either. So, he attacked with supersonic steel rebars. The ice wall user naturally tried to defend immediately, but while the ice wall could block bullets, it was utterly inadequate against supersonic rebars. In an instant, the ice wall was shattered by the force. Twek, 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 twek. Both men were simultaneously pierced by several rebars. Under the immense energy impact and vibration, their bodies disintegrated, leaving hardly a recognizable piece of flesh. Xiao Ran didn't rush down to absorb their abilities. Gao Yong. He assumed this demolition team was sent by Gao Yong. Would he just send this team and then ignore them? Perhaps he was following close behind. If they had actually blown up the villa, or even injured or killed him, Gao Yong would have emerged to reap the rewards. And if not, like in the current situation, would Gao Yong come to absorb old Jean and the others' abilities? He couldn't let Gao Yong get them for free. Could he? So Xiao Ran waited. However, time ticked by minute, but no one appeared. He's really good at hiding. In the distance, Chiao, Sheening whistled. Boss Gao is really something, willing to just abandon two ability user subordinates like that. That's at least two abilities. Gao Yong shot him a cold glance. Before the apocalypse, if a merchant like Xiao Sheening dared to speak to him like that, his shop would have been shut down the very same day. Now, he was just a damn straight dog himself, and he dared make sarcastic remarks in front of him. However, Gao Yang's composure was too deep. He showed no hint of his emotions. The abilities of two subordinates? So what if they were given to Xiao Ran? In the future, as long as he could kill Xiao Ran, everything would naturally be his again. Those empowered don't fuss over temporary gains or losses. They focus on the bigger picture. That's why this Xiao Sheening was destined never to achieve anything great. Gao Yong was lost in his own thoughts. Although he had never directly confronted Xiao Ran, this person had destroyed Xiao Sheening's building materials market and wiped out over 200 ability users. Just how strong was he? And, crucially, his lair was so incredibly fortified. So, how could it be dealt with? Simple. Call for more people. Cheng Qian, Wei Liy, Luo Yufei, any of them would do. Or even better, all four major powers could strike together. No matter how strong Xiao Ran is, can he possibly contend with the four strongest factions simultaneously? It's just that, in that case, the over 3 billion in supplies would have to be divided among four parties, so the gains would naturally be smaller. He subconsciously excluded Xiao Sheening. After all, how could a stray dog be qualified to share the spoils of victory with them? Both sides were playing it cagey. No, that's not right. It should be said they were being careful, cautious. And so, Xiao Ran didn't manage to lure Gao Yong out, and Gao Yong didn't wait for Xiao Ran to emerge and collect the special abilities. What a pity. Xiao Ran tooted. Old Gao was being too cautious. Unconsciously, night had fallen. A thick fog immediately appeared, blanketing the entire world. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Even the most powerful searchlights were useless. The fog was too dense. Xiao Ran finally made his move. He absorbed the special abilities of old Jean and his companion. He didn't know if it was because too much time had passed or if their abilities weren't high-level enough to begin with. But he only managed to absorb energy equivalent to 2 mere wisps. A pitifully small amount. Had these two never absorbed special abilities before? No, that wasn't right. He didn't know about old Jean, but the ice wall user clearly couldn't have been in his natural state. Otherwise, a few bullets would have shattered the ice wall. There's no way they could have retreated so easily. So after a special ability user dies, the energy in their body slowly dissipates, Xiao Ran mused. It's not a quick process. A delay of half an hour wouldn't have mattered much. But this time, to lure old Gao and his group out, I waited over 2 hours. That's why most of their energy has dispersed. Looks like you really do have to strike while the iron is hot. But even though the absorbed energy was meager, it didn't prevent the side effects from kicking in. Soon, Xiao Ran felt the familiar side effects kick in, a growing pressure that quickly became urgent. But the only remotely passable woman nearby had already been sprayed with his poison water for an experiment. And she was only barely passable at that. Go through that again. Forget it. Besides, I don't need to wait here for old Gao and his crew anymore. What to do? Xiao Ran thought for a moment. First, he'd go back to the villa and kill the survivor. Keeping someone locked up in a house meant dealing with their food, water, and waste. Besides, old Gao had already confirmed his presence in the villa. There was no longer any need to keep someone there. So, this person had fulfilled their purpose. To Qinghong Tower. No choice. This wasn't pre-apocalypse anymore, where you could just hail a cab and tell the driver to take you to some fun place. Nor could he book a hotel room and casually tell the front desk he wanted some fast food. Now, he had to find it himself. Xiao Ran started his hovercraft and headed towards Qinghong Tower. Fortunately, his spatial perception now reached 262 meters. What did that mean? When you're driving normally, you might not even see 200 meters ahead. Because of heavy traffic, any truck blocking your view could reduce your visibility to just 50 or 100 meters. Moreover, this 200-plus meters was a 360-degree radius. The streets on both sides were fully mapped in his mind. As a Sioux City native, Xiao Ran could still easily determine his location. So, even traveling through the fog, it hardly slowed him down. He reached Qinghong Tower in less than an hour. Phew! When the urgency had subsided, and then faded completely, Xiao Ran's mind was as calm as still water. He had entered a state of sagely clarity. The teachers were truly dedicated, had great attitudes, and were highly skilled. No complaints there. Xiao Ran couldn't help but think of the Japanese girls. If I ever awaken a teleportation ability, I'm definitely going to Reborn to instruct those Sakura girls on how to shoot a proper romantic action film. Mark my words. A night passed. Xiao Ran set off early to return to Qingfeng Garden. Today, he had to go to Hope Camp again to deal with the last batch of patients, then bring a few nurses back to Qingfeng Garden. They'd serve as maids usually, and resume their old profession when necessary. When the hovercraft returned to Qingfeng Garden, Su Qingmei and the other women all breathed a sigh of relief. How could they not worry when their man went out on dangerous ventures? After all, Xiao Ran's current opponents were too strong. After breakfast, Xiao Ran first checked on Xia Chuchio's condition. Experience told him she should start condensing a seed tomorrow or the day after. Very good. Whether she became an evolver or not, as long as she got through it, it would be one less thing weighing on his mind. On the way, he mused that he wouldn't go to the villa for the next few days. How could he have so much time to play with old Gao and Chao Sheening every day? Better to leave them hanging for a few days. About 10 minutes later, Xiao Ran arrived at Hope Camp. From a distance, even before reaching the entrance, Xiao Ran saw messy sled tracks on the ground. Someone had come. Why someone had come, and not someone from inside had gone out? Because the camp had run out of sleds long ago. It had to be outsiders. Xiao Ran frowned. Had someone stumbled upon this place by chance, or had those who fled earlier led them here? He hadn't killed everyone here. Firstly, he hadn't revealed his identity. Secondly, this place wasn't important. Killing wasn't exactly a pleasant activity, so he had let those people fend for themselves. But had one of them actually led outsiders here? A faint smile touched his lips. As the hovercraft moved a little further, the sanatorium gradually entered his spatial perception range. And as he continued forward, more and more of the sanatorium was captured by his senses. The main building, the patient building, more and more structures came into his perception, and Xiao Ran's recently relaxed brow furrowed once more. He saw dead people. Among them were several nurses. They had died horribly, stark naked, covered in wounds, their faces etched with fear and resentment, eyes wide open, unable to rest in peace. Clearly, they had been abused before they died. And in this patient building, 14 people were lying in ambush. Coincidentally, they were talking. Xiao Ran paused, startled, because he could actually hear their conversation. It wasn't exactly hearing, it was projected directly into his mind. Actually, the idea that spatial perception could pick up speech wasn't strange to Xiao Ran. He wasn't even shocked, because he figured it was something spatial perception should be able to capture. He just hadn't found the right knack for it, which was why he'd only been getting visuals without audio. Now, finally, he had both sound and picture. What'd I just do? It seems like, in my anger, I triggered something. And so, it was as if the 14 people inside were right in front of him, only he was invisible. No one could see or touch him. Boss, how long do we have to wait? Yeah, it's been almost a full day since yesterday afternoon, two of them said impatiently. The man they called boss was around 30 years old, bundled in a thick down jacket, hands shoved into his pockets, looking like he was shivering from the cold. He glared at his two subordinates and said, "Those nurses said this guy comes around 9 or 10 every day. What's your hurry? All of you, shut up and keep your eyes peeled." Unfortunately, his spatial perception couldn't gauge the strength of Espers. Xiao Ran figured there were Espers among the 14, perhaps more than one, but he couldn't sense the intensity of their abilities. Of course, he wasn't about to let them stop him. He brought the hovercraft to a halt and strode right in. "Boss, he's here. He really does have a hovercraft. Perfect. Once we snatch this craft, we can go wherever we please. Ladies, here we come." "Oomph. You're so damn rough. You tortured those nurses to death. Otherwise, we could have had more fun with them." "Yeah, rich coming from you. As if you didn't strangle one to death yourself." "Shut up. Don't let him detect us." The boss, clad in a down jacket, snapped. "Everyone, find a hiding spot. When he enters, open fire together as planned. Shoot to kill." "Yes, sir." They scrambled for cover, all drawing their guns and aiming at the doorway. Before long, footsteps approached. Each of them tightened their grip on their weapons, adrenaline surging. Word was this guy was incredibly dangerous, so their nervousness was understandable. Creak! The door swung open. Bang, 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 bang. Gunfire erupted instantly. They all emptied their magazines simultaneously before standing up to peer at the entrance. However, they looked as if they'd seen a ghost. A figure stood strikingly in the doorway. Unlike what the nurses had described, this mysterious person wasn't wearing a helmet. His features were clearly visible. A young man in his late 20s, a mocking smile playing on his lips. But they had fired so many bullets. Why hadn't a single one hit him? Their boss also stepped out, laughing heartily. "Brother, you truly are an Esper. A pleasure to meet you. What a fortunate encounter. It takes a fight to make friends. How about we become friends?" Before he could finish, he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a torrent of crimson. It was blood. Ugh. So this was his ability, blood spitting. However, just as the stream of blood reached Xiao Ran, it bizarrely vanished. Now, everyone finally understood why Xiao Ran had been unharmed by the hail of bullets. Just like this blood projectile, it had vanished so strangely. The boss, who had been laughing so heartily, could no longer manage a smile. His smile had hidden his killing intent. He meant to lull Xiao Ran into a false sense of security and then launch a surprise attack. He hadn't expected Xiao Ran to have never let his guard down, using his ability the entire time. But if you keep your ability active constantly, the boss thought, aren't you afraid of depleting your power and exhausting yourself? "Ha ha, brother, you're truly formidable. My little test had no effect on you at all." But in the next moment, he laughed again. If one wasn't paying close attention, they wouldn't have noticed a trickle of blood seeping from under his feet, flowing towards Xiao Ran along the cracks in the floor tiles. This stream of blood seemed to have a life of its own, flowing rapidly and unerringly. Xiao Ran looked at the man, also smiled, and asked, "And you are?" "This old brother's surname is Pang. Call me Pang Hu." The boss was controlling the blood on the ground, making it continuously approach Xiao Ran. This blood was highly toxic. A single drop could kill an ordinary person instantly. Since Xiao Ran was about to be a dead man anyway, Pang Hu didn't mind him knowing his real name. Xiao Ran continued, "How did you find this place?" "Oh, it was this subordinate of mine. He escaped from here." Pang Hu sold out his man without a second thought, pointing to one of them. "When I heard about it, I thought I should get acquainted with you, brother. So, I had him lead the way, and we snuck over." "Get acquainted my ass," Xiao Ran thought. "He clearly wants to seize my ability." Xiao Ran couldn't be bothered to expose the lie. What was the point? He asked his final question. "Which faction do you belong to?" "Chung Qian's." Pang Hu's expression tensed slightly before he resumed laughing. "You know my boss?" Xiao Ran watched him. using his spatial perception to capture the man's micro-expressions. He shook his head. You're lying. Pang, who was genuinely stunned for a moment, then let out a strange, cackling laugh. Were you a psychologist before all this? Otherwise, how could you detect such a subtle change in my micro-expressions and conclude I was lying? Xiao Ran didn't answer, continuing. Are you perhaps from Wujiang district? Damn it, I am from Wujiang. Don't you suching folks get any ideas about lumping us in with you? Pang, who blurted out. It was well known that the greater Su province was fragmented. Not only the province, but also its cities were like this. For example, none of the county-level cities under Suqing's jurisdiction would acknowledge Suqing as the big brother. This disunity was deeply ingrained. So, when Xiao Ran mentioned Wujiang district, Pang, who instinctively bristled. Of course, the line of blood on the ground was now extremely close to Xiao Ran. Pang, whose shout also served to further distract him. Xiao Ran nodded. It seemed certain that this Pang, who was from Wujiang district. Although this place wasn't actually far from Wujiang, Xiao Ran hadn't paid much attention to the situation there before, nor did he know if there were any powerful espers in the area. Whatever he thought, just kill them all. With a mere thought, he decisively activated spatial compression. Instantly, the 14 people in the room felt as if an invisible giant hand was pushing them, causing them to stumble uncontrollably towards the center of the room. What's happening? It feels like someone's pushing me. Heavens, I can't control my body. Amidst the panic, the 14 people were squeezed into a tight cluster. This itself wasn't too bad, but in the next moment, expressions of utter terror appeared on their faces. Not only were they clumped together, but a terrifying force continued to press in on them, causing them immense pain, even making their bones creak and groan. Pain, but even greater was the fear. If this continued, they would die, and their deaths would be gruesome. In fact, Xiao Ran could have killed them much more easily. But having seen the state of the dead nurses, he decided to kill these men in the most brutal way possible. Pang, who grew anxious, he quickly tried to control the blood on the ground to attack Xiao Ran. If it just touched him, the man would be dead for sure. But as the blood spread toward Xiao Ran, it vanished without a trace. It's over. Pang, who was dumbstruck. Before, he hadn't been overly panicked, believing he could turn the tables. But when this move failed, he finally panicked completely. His so-called courage instantly evaporated. He immediately begged for mercy. I'm one of Sister Qin's men. Our Sister Qin is incredibly powerful. She has over 1,000 espers under her command. I'm just a small fry. There's no benefit for you in killing me. But if you offend Sister Qin, you're dead meat. 1,000 espers? Xiao Ran couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. You're full of it, he thought. Look at factions like Chao Sheening's. They have, at most, 40 or 50 espers. He was able to kill over 100 espers in the building materials market only because it was a marketplace where many espers went to buy and sell things, and he got lucky. So, this Sister Qin has 1,000 espers under her? Is this a joke? Xiao Ran ignored them, focusing all his power on spatial compression. Crack, snap, pop. The 13 ordinary people couldn't withstand it. The sound of bones breaking was incessant. They were crushed into each other, yet, agonizingly, they weren't killed instantly. The experience was so horrifying it robbed them of even the ability to scream or cry. Only Pang, who was slightly better off. As a metahuman, his bones were naturally much tougher than an ordinary person's. So, for the moment, he hadn't been crushed into by others, but he had been crushed into others. For instance, his elbow was jammed into one person's abdomen, and his foot was embedded in another's chest cavity. From the outside, these people had become a grotesque, square, human Rubik's Cube. Crack, 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 the sound of shattering bones continued. Xiao Ran's gaze was utterly cold. Towards beasts like these, there was no need for any sympathy. SP, spare me. Pang, who could still make a sound, but it gurgled out from a pool of blood. As he opened his mouth, he swallowed a large amount of it, causing him to choke and cough violently. Xiao Ran merely watched him die, his eyes devoid of any pity or reluctance. You're not human, you're a devil. Pang, who suddenly screamed, agitated. If you were human, how could you just watch? How could you kill people in such a cruel way? Xiao Ran let out a chuckle. You actually have the gall to accuse me? Forget it. Why argue with a dead man? Crunch, crack, snap. As the space continued to compress, Pang, whose bones finally gave way. They emitted mournful creaks before starting to break, shattering into a complete mess. His body was also rapidly compressed and deformed, turning into an unidentifiable mass of mixed flesh, blood, and bone. With a thought from Xiao Ran, splat. The object formed by the 14 intermingled corpses plummeted from midair, splattering across the ground. He had already targeted a piece of bone. Without any disgust, he reached out and pressed it. Huh? He paused, surprised, because no warm current flowed into him. How could that be? He was 100% certain that bone belonged to Pang Hu. Xiao Ran touched another piece of bone, but still, no warm current appeared. This made him frown. What was going on? This was the first time he'd encountered such a situation, killing a metahuman and not absorbing their powers. It was too strange. After thinking for a moment, he left, but the incident took root in his mind. Xiao Ran walked out of the patient building. It was now completely empty. The main building had long been devoid of living people. So, in the entire Hope camp, he was the only one left. It didn't matter. This camp had never truly lived up to its name. Now, with not a soul left, it finally matched the grim reality. No need to come back here again. Xiao Ran strode away and returned to Qingfeng Garden. Now, he only had one patient left, Xiao. However, it was clear she hadn't reached the point of forming an energy seed today. What to do this afternoon? Xiao Ran wasn't interested in going back to Jufu residential area to wait for old Gao and the others. If they couldn't find him, too bad. Didn't they have the patience to wait a few more days? It's not like I exist solely for your convenience, he muttered. Forget it, I'll just rest today. Xiao Ran thought for a moment. These past few days, it had been either killing people or setting off explosions, boom, boom, boom. He really should take a break and relax. Back at Qingfeng Garden, since he didn't need to treat anyone today, he returned a bit early, before mealtime. So, he started playing with Baozi. Baozi had been with him the longest. He couldn't neglect him. With his master playing with him, Baozi was naturally excited, jumping and leaping around. Hey Baozi, do you want to evolve? Xiao Ran had a sudden idea. Even huskies can mutate successfully. As my proud Chinese mutt, there's no reason you can't. How about this? I'll let you choose. If you want to evolve, bark once. If not, meow once. Could Baozi possibly understand what he was saying? But with his master rarely favoring him like this, he naturally wagged his tail frantically to please him. Woof, woof, woof. Xiao Ran was shocked. You're that eager? Good, good, good. I love your outstanding courage. All right then. After I've cured Xiao and gained a bit more experience, I'll let you start evolving too. He, walking a mutated dog. Just thinking about it is exciting. He patted the dog's head and chuckled again. What game do you want to play? All right, let's do something simple. I'll throw the ball. You fetch. Xiao Ran took a baseball from his storage space and casually tossed it. Baozi paused for a moment, then cleverly ran over, picked up the baseball, and brought it back to Xiao Ran. Further this time, Xiao Ran said with a smile. Let's play outside. With his current physique, and assuming he was fully equipped for the environment, staying outside for an hour straight would be no problem at all. An ordinary person could last 15 minutes at most before their lungs couldn't take it. Baozi was a dog, and a dog's ability to withstand cold naturally surpassed a human's. Let's just play for 10 minutes. Xiao Ran tossed the baseball in his hand. Watch out, I'm going to throw it hard. Baozi wagged his tail repeatedly, looking very expectant. Xiao Ran's muscles tensed. Swoosh. He threw the ball. Zoom. Baozi shot off after it. But he only ran a few meters before stopping, turning his head to look at Xiao Ran with disdainful doggy eyes. Xiao Ran, using his full strength, had thrown the baseball like a meteor. It quickly flew past the 1 kilometer mark and was still going. How could he possibly catch that? Baozi might be a dog, but dogs have intelligence too. You're actually messing with a dog. Xiao Ran burst out laughing. Sorry. I didn't realize how strong I've become. Every time he absorbed a power, his physique grew stronger. This was an all-around enhancement, including strength, speed, reflexes, and unseen defenses. His skin was now incredibly tough. It might not be bulletproof, but an ordinary person with a knife would find it almost impossible to break his skin. He gently tossed the baseball. Only 8 meters away, Baozi happily ran towards it. However, when he snapped at it, he didn't bite the ball. The doggo was baffled. Isn't the ball right in front of me? How can I not touch it? He stubbornly kept trying to bite it, but each time he just bit into empty air. Woof, woof, woof. Baozi's fur stood on end. He was terrified. It's haunted. Xiao Ran finally couldn't hold it in anymore and burst out laughing. He had used banishment on the baseball. Baozi looked back at Xiao Ran. Although he had the intelligence of a 3-year-old child at best, seeing Xiao Ran laughing like that, he could still sense something. He looked at Xiao Ran with utter contempt. If he could speak, he'd probably grumble, I may be a dog, but you, master, are a real piece of work. All right, stop looking at me with those mournful eyes. I'll give you an extra treat for lunch. How about that? Xiao Ran chuckled. Come on, let's go for a run. get some proper exercise. 10 minutes or so later, Xiao Ran dragged Baozi, who looked like a dead dog, into the mansion. For a dog, he didn't even run that far before collapsing. Baozi, even if it's the apocalypse, you can't neglect your training. Look at you, all out of shape. Baozi looked utterly dejected, as if life had lost all meaning. It wasn't like he hadn't run with people before, but who ran like Xiao Ran? It was as if his legs had wings. He'd just whoosh and shoot off, faster than a car. Is that even human speed? Play with you again? If I do, I'm a dog. No, if I ever play with you again, I'll wish I were human. Dinner time. Xiao Ran kept his word and gave Leopard an extra meal. But the poor thing was so exhausted it had no appetite for ages, just staring blankly at the food. After eating, Xiao Ran accompanied the women, watching dramas, reading books, and observing their bodies? How did they suddenly get into studying human anatomy? Still, the 11 women were a diverse group, each beautiful in her own unique way. Some plump, some slender. Heaven really outdid itself, creating countless women, all completely different, yet all breathtakingly beautiful. Petite darlings, adorable sweethearts, and well-endowed beauties, TSK. They played some games, some cards, the wholesome kind, of course. Xiao Ran claimed he'd long given up on strip poker. Well, he had just played yesterday, so that naturally counted as a long time ago. The afternoon quickly passed, and as dusk fell, everyone gathered around the large round table, waiting for dinner. The table was huge, easily seating 16, so with only 12 of them in the house now, there was plenty of room. So, is this a hint I should take 4 more? Counting Chiao, that still leaves room for 3 more. Definitely doable. Xiao Ran pondered if he should get an even bigger table. After all, he'd been looking at this one for so long, he was starting to get tired of it. It was affecting his appetite. A 20-seater? Or maybe go all out and get one for 100. That should sort out once and for all. No need to change it again in the future. After dinner, the women went to work out. Some did yoga, some aerobics, some went swimming. Xiao Ran, on the other hand, started practicing combat skills. His physique was incredibly powerful now. Though he hadn't tested his exact strength, it definitely wasn't inferior to those low-level physical type ability users. So, he was qualified to practice combat arts. It would be best if I had someone to spar with. Unfortunately, none of the girls have awakened any powers. If it came to actual close combat, one punch from me wouldn't just make them whimper. They'd be dead. Where can I find a girl who's both good-looking and a good fighter? After all, if she wasn't a girl, why would Xiao Ran bring her home, right? I can only hope that among Su Qingmei and the others, 1 or 2 might turn out to be physical type ability users. The night passed uneventfully. When Xiao Ran woke up in the morning, he was full of anticipation. Xiao should be condensing her energy seed today. With the Hope Camp completely destroyed, Xiao was now the only remaining test subject. Sure enough, the energy within Xiao's body was gradually becoming more violent. However, it hadn't reached the critical point yet. That would probably happen this afternoon. So he'd wait. He played with the women for a while. Then he wanted to play with Leopard, but when Leopard saw him approaching, it bolted as if it had seen a rabid dog. Did yesterday's training scare it that badly? Xiao Ran shook his head, took out his phone, and started reading a novel. Lunch was uneventful. Around 1 p.m., Xiao finally reached the critical point. Energy surged wildly, attempting to form an energy seed in her mind. But because the energy was too violent, the seed shattered as soon as it began to take shape, failing to condense successfully. Xiao Ran decisively intervened. Using his spatial perception, he intervened with spatial cutting. Even so, the energy seed still couldn't form. At most, his intervention prevented her body from exploding under the pressure. If this continued, even if Xiao survived, she would remain an ordinary person. Was there no other way? Wait, an idea struck Xiao Ran. Could he use banishment? If I use banishment to prevent the energy from becoming too violent, wouldn't that allow the energy seed to form smoothly? The difficulty should decrease significantly, at least. However, banishment could only target complete, concrete objects. Otherwise, if I could directly banish a target's heart or brain, wouldn't they become heartless and brainless? Killing would be too easy then. But, on a microscopic level, the human body could certainly be divided. For example, individual cells. The limit of banishment is that it cannot exceed 125 cubic units, but it can be shrunk down to an infinitesimally small size, and the quantity is unlimited as long as the total volume doesn't exceed 125 cubic units. So, Couldn't I cast tens of thousands or even hundreds of millions of banishment spaces at once, each the size of a cell? Wouldn't that allow me to use it inside the human body? Xiao Ran's eyes gleamed. This was feasible. He intervened again. Banish, banish, banish. He divided the energy within Chiao's body into countless pieces, throwing most of them into banishment spaces, leaving only a small amount to condense the seed. But damn, this was exhausting. Firstly, he had to simultaneously control so many banishment spaces. Secondly, maintaining banishment spaces already consumed a huge amount of power. But to Xiao Ran's pleasant surprise, the energy seed in Chiao's mind was stabilizing. Very good. He began to carefully release more energy, allowing the seed to absorb it and grow stronger. Continue, continue, and continue. Fortunately, because the total volume of the banishment spaces didn't even add up to half a cubic unit, maintaining this ability didn't consume an excessive amount of his powers. However, the mental strain was immense. He had to control tens of thousands of banishment spaces simultaneously. Xiao Ran felt like he was going mad. It was an enormous test of his willpower. He almost fainted, but he saw it as a form of training. He could do it. Moreover, if he succeeded this time, when Su Qingmei and the others needed to evolve in the future, he would have a much greater certainty of their success, rather than just ensuring their survival. Xiao Ran continuously managed the banishment spaces. More and more energy was carefully channeled, and the energy seed grew increasingly brilliant, possessing an indescribable beauty. 20,000 spaces to manage. 10,000, 5,000, 1,000. By this point, the energy seed had essentially formed. Xiao Ran stopped the banishment. Within Chiao's mind, the energy seed remained brilliant. Suddenly, the seed flashed and abruptly shattered. It wasn't a failure of evolution, but a success. The seed transformed into countless motes of starlight, merging into every cell of Chiao's body, rapidly strengthening her. This would cause her physical constitution to far surpass that of an ordinary person. But most importantly, she had awakened an ability. What attribute was it? Chiao's eyes snapped open, and she sat up straight. Congratulations. Xiao Ran smiled. You're now a superpower user with an awakened ability. An ability, Chiao said, dumbfounded. Xiao Ran nodded, conjured an apple out of thin air, and then made it disappear just as quickly. My ability is space-related. You try yours. Chiao was dumbstruck. This time, she had truly opened the door to a new world. It's not until you... Xiao Ran's phone suddenly rang. An incoming call? Was it Lu Mei? Xiao Ran took it out and looked, but the display surprisingly showed unknown number. Could it be? He looked at Chiao in surprise, and she smiled back at him. Your ability is... controlling cell phones? Xiao Ran asked. If this had been before the apocalypse, that power would have been insanely strong. Scam syndicates would have worshipped you like a god, and security agencies would have fought to recruit you. But now? Good for jump scares at night. Chiao nodded, then shook her head. I can control anything powered by electricity. The range is about 2 kilometers, so it is actually kind of useful, Xiao Ran mused. Can you control engines too? Chiao looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded. Yes. Damn, that could be very useful. Not just useful, potentially game-changing. Imagine sneaking into a military base, unlocking a missile silo, targeting an enemy, and launching it. Holy crap. The Xiao family once boasted that if anyone dared kill their old man, the Eastern Military Command would flatten the place with a missile strike. It sounded like pure bravado at the time. But with Chiao's ability, that lie could become terrifyingly real if she ever found a military base. So yeah, her power might seem lame in a direct fight, but give her access to the right facilities. She could become every powered individual's worst nightmare. Unless they had some god-tier defense skill, they'd be toast. Xiao Ran's eyes sparkled. This gem was his. Well, technically she was his. Who else would have invested so much time and effort taking care of her, helping her evolve successfully? For what? It's not like he was some kind of saint. Chiao blinked her big, beautiful eyes at him, voice soft and full of emotion. Xiao Ran, thank you for taking care of me these past few days. If it weren't for you, I probably would have starved to death. Actually, no you wouldn't have, Xiao Ran thought. In his last life, he'd been stuck with a constant low fever and felt weak all over. Did the Zheng family ever help him? Nope. They barely gave him any food. Xiao Ran now suspected they were just waiting for him to die so that they could butcher him for meat. But to their surprise, he never did die. Instead, they starved first and tried to tie him up and kill him. Strangely enough, while he was sick his metabolism seemed to shut down. He didn't feel hunger or thirst at all. So, if evolution worked the same way for all powered individuals, even without his help, Xiao would have survived. Not that he'd tell her that. He simply smiled. It's the least I could do. Xiao looked like she was about to say something, but then she remembered something else, and her face instantly turned red. Xiao Ran had fed her meds, water, and even fruit. Mouth to mouth. She was already unbelievably beautiful. Now, blushing, she looked even more stunning. Even Xiao Ran, who'd seen his fair share of jaw-dropping beauties, was momentarily dazed. An absolute stunner. Seeing him so distracted, Xiao felt a little smug. Back in the pre-apocalypse world, plenty of people had been mesmerized by her looks. During college, she once sat by a lakeside and watched as over a dozen people got so distracted watching her, they fell into the lake. She was used to that kind of attention. It was nothing new, but seeing that look on Xiao Ran's face still made her heart flutter. Then, her expression changed. Her brows furrowed slightly. A thought crept in. During her fever-induced haze, she drifted in and out of consciousness. In those rare lucid moments, she was sure she'd sensed other women in the house. Several of them. And their relationship with Xiao Ran didn't seem casual. She wasn't stupid. She knew how things work now. Weak women depending on strong men was the new normal. But sharing a man? Her pride screamed no. Xiao Ran, observant as ever, caught the subtle shift in her face and instantly knew what she was thinking. Modern educated women didn't usually want to share their men with others. Each one of the women by his side, like Su Qingmei, was a top-tier beauty. In the old world, they could have easily married into rich second-gen families. Of course, getting into the top elite circles would have been harder. That required more than just beauty, family background, achievements like Olympic medals, things like that. These women followed Xiao Ran because life had beaten the arrogance out of them. They realized they couldn't survive on their own, but with Xiao Ran, not only could they live, they could thrive, and in luxury far beyond what most people could dream of. Xiao Ran was the elite circle now, the top of the top. Xiao hadn't reached that point of clarity yet, so, naturally, she still acted a bit spoiled. But Xiao Ran didn't want to lose someone with her kind of power. If they ever found a military base, she could become a literal god of death. And besides, women's hearts were unpredictable. What if she got jealous and turned her powers on him? He wasn't going to play hard to get or mind games. He needed to lock this down. Now, Xiao took a deep breath and said calmly, "Well, I'm all better now. I'll head home." Xiao Ran patted her smooth shoulder. "All right, want to walk you back?" "No need," she said politely. She needed some space to think about where she stood with Xiao Ran, whether they should continue this. Whatever it was. And if they did, maybe he needed to choose her or them. She stood up, a bit unsteady after lying down for 10 days. It took her a moment to regain balance, though her newly evolved body was far stronger than before. She pushed her emotions down and was about to leave, when suddenly, she let out a soft whimper. Her body trembled, her skin flushed red, and a deep, burning need surged through her. "Chiao, what's wrong?" Xiao Ran's voice came from behind her, low and magnetic, full of masculine charm. It sounded so good. She felt her thoughts turning dangerously hazy. Wait, was she really getting that kind of urge right now? She blinked, confused. This was the kind of feeling she'd only experienced during the occasional vivid dream, the kind every normal woman had once in a while. But she wasn't dreaming. This was real. She looked up at Xiao Ran, and suddenly, everything about him felt irresistibly attractive. She wanted him badly. No. She gritted her teeth and forced herself to resist. "I am fine," she said. She tried to walk, but barely made it one step before her legs turned to jelly and her thoughts turned to... "Not jelly. This is you being fine?" Xiao Ran asked, holding her shoulders. She wasn't the physical combat type, though even if she were, she couldn't match his current strength. She was easily turned around. "Your face is red," he said, alarmed. "Are you burning up again?" "Fever." Yeah, she was definitely burning. But maybe lose the H. Xiao struggled to hold onto the tiny thread of resistance she had left. But all she could smell was him. Xiao Ran's intoxicating, masculine scent. It made her crave even more. "Xiao Ran," she whispered, lips parted, eyes heavy with desire. And then it hit him. "Oh no, it's the side effect," he said, suddenly serious. After awakening or absorbing powers, some people experience intense urges. If it's not resolved, "What happens?" she asked, nearly in tears. "You'll explode," he said gravely. "Chiao, I can't just stand by and watch you die like this." "You bastard." That was her last coherent thought before desire swallowed her whole. It's time for dinner, Xiao Ran said. He had helped Xiao evolve in the afternoon, and now it was already dark. TSK, the physique of an ability user is really something else, he mused. Xiao just evolved. If she absorbs a few more abilities in the future. TSK. Indeed, it's always the ox that drops from exhaustion, never the field that's worn out by plowing. Xiao couldn't help but fidget awkwardly. Dinner meant facing Xiao Ran's bevy of beauties, and she was easily embarrassed. Come on, the new bride always has to meet the in-laws eventually, Xiao Ran chuckled. Xiao shot him a pretty eye roll. Meeting in-laws? This is meeting love rivals. No, that's not quite right either. This is meeting first sister, second sister, third sister, 10th sister. She hesitated awkwardly for a moment, then got dressed and went out with him. The physique of an ability user truly was remarkable. Even though she'd just lost her virginity, she only walked with a slight awkwardness. Arriving at the dining room, Su Qingmei and the others had mostly finished their preparations. Seeing Xiao Ran and Xiao arrive, they all smiled warmly at the newcomer. Naturally, they had to give Xiao Ran face, so today was a welcoming ceremony for the new addition. As for vying for favor and jealous tiffs, that was a matter for another time. Xiao hadn't quite expected such a reception. She quickly smiled back, though her smile was quite stiff and awkward. However, she did a quick count, then turned to pinch Xiao Ran. Didn't you say there were only 11? That's right. 11, not counting you, Xiao Ran grinned. Xiao rolled her eyes again. Great, now there's an 11th sister too. However, her fleeting resentment was quickly overshadowed by the sumptuous dinner. Heavens, do you eat like this every day? She asked, astonished. Xiao Ran shook his head. How could we? Today is a special occasion to welcome you to our big family, so we're celebrating. Xiao nodded. That made more sense. Still, for Xiao Ran to be able to produce so many precious ingredients, it was no wonder these 11 unique and exceptional women were willing to follow him, even if a couple of them weren't quite on the same level in terms of looks. Zhang Jingya and Zhong Lei suddenly felt a prickle of offense. Xiao Ran added, Normally, we only have about 15 dishes. You're humble bragging. Xiao was speechless and utterly baffled. Although Xiao Ran's ability was space-related, theoretically making him a mobile warehouse, shouldn't a warehouse be empty to begin with? Did awakening his ability also come with a full stock of supplies? Eat up. However, Xiao Ran served her several impressive main courses, like spiny lobster and brown crab, and she ate until she was pleasantly dazed, completely forgetting her earlier question. After they had eaten and drunk their fill, Xiao Ran made an announcement. Starting today, he had decided to help all the women advance their evolution, one per day. This way, when each reached a critical point, he would only need to focus on one person. If they all underwent the process simultaneously, the most he could do was ensure they wouldn't die, but he couldn't guarantee successful evolution for everyone. After all, the process was incredibly draining for him and required intense concentration. Since Xiao Ran could guarantee a safety rate of over 99%, the women were no longer afraid. The worst that could happen was a failed evolution, in which case they would simply remain as they were. It wasn't life-threatening. Su Qingmei, having been the first to request it, would go first. After her would be Lu Cha, then Zhang Jingya and Zhong Lei. These two had also volunteered, self-aware that their looks and figures were a notch below some of the others, so they felt they needed to prove themselves in other areas. Xiao Ran didn't particularly mind the order. There were only 11 of them. Even being last would only mean an 11-day wait. Once the arrangements were settled, Xiao Ran took out his treasured poison hailstone and rubbed it lightly on Su Qingmei's skin. NGH. Even though Su Qingmei had already heard from Xiao Ran that it would be excruciatingly painful, actually experiencing it made her unable to suppress a groan. But, true to being the toughest among the women, she immediately clenched her teeth and bore the pain. Only, beads of sweat kept forming on her forehead, and her body couldn't help but tremble. Half an hour later, she calmed down, as if nothing had happened. Another half a day would pass, and when she woke up the next morning, she would start to develop a fever, whether high or low was unknown, followed by an incubation period of about 10 days, before finally starting to form an energy seed. Han Yun and the others were both expectant and a little scared. Su Ran, however, was primarily worried. Even though Xiao Ran sounded completely confident, that was her sister, after all. The night passed. Honey, Xiao rolled over, reaching out to embrace Xiao Ran, but her hand met empty air. However, She didn't wake, merely murmuring softly, her breathing steady and even. Xiao Ran, on the other hand, was sitting by the window. He was used to sleeping and waking early. What to do today? Sigh. It was a happy sort of problem to have. Anyone else would wake up worrying about their 3 meals for the day. There wouldn't be much to consider. They'd naturally go out to scavenge for supplies. But Xiao Ran had no worries about food or drink. His concern was how to pass the time. And, well, how to get stronger. However, getting stronger wasn't the goal itself, just a means to ensure he could protect the life he currently had. Maybe I should keep collecting fuel, Xiao Ran thought. But now, various factions had risen, and fuel was a strategic resource. Every faction was gathering it, treating it with the same importance as food. So collecting fuel now wouldn't be easy. Fortunately, he had raided numerous gas stations in the early days of the apocalypse. Plus, the mansion's heating was primarily supplied by a boiler, which burned firewood, significantly reducing fuel consumption. So, I need a lot of coal, preferably anthracite. The steel mill would have been the best choice, but Wei Liy had taken it. He wondered how much coal was left. It was worth a look. After all, did Wei Liy have any space ability users on her side? If not, could she even have moved all the coal from a steel mill? Besides, there was no harm in checking. Yes, he decided. Today he'd go check out the steel mill. After a while, the women woke up one by one. After washing up, they came downstairs for breakfast. Chiao was naturally astounded once again. Breakfast was so lavish. The conditions here were just too good. Not only was there ample food, but it was also very warm, and there was even hot water. The temperature-controlled swimming pool, in particular, delighted her immensely. Swimming was her favorite sport. Xiao Ran chose Sheening to go out with him today. He had doted on Chiao enough yesterday. It couldn't be like that every day. He had to treat them all fairly. After all, Zhou Yunsu and Su Qingmei currently held the top positions. He couldn't break the rules he himself had set. Besides, Chiao had another task. She was to install machine guns in various locations around the mansion today to complete its automation, well, semi-automation, as she would still need to control them. Oh, right, Su Qingmei had indeed started running a fever, a low-grade one, just like Xiao Ran's. But whether it was a high or low fever didn't matter. Could a low-grade fever awaken spatial abilities? Xiao Ran set out with Su Sheening. The hovercraft moved steadily. Su Sheening was silent for a while, then suddenly asked, "Do you think I'm a bit dense?" Having gotten into university, her intelligence wasn't in question, so she was likely asking about her personality. Back in school, she could claim she couldn't be bothered with that green tea type, but now she had to contend with Zhou Yunsu, and it was clear she was at a disadvantage. Xiao Ran thought for a moment. "You're not exactly dense. It's just that your personality is a bit soft. In this world, that kind of personality isn't well suited. So whether it's your sister or that green tea, they adapt better than you." Su Sheening couldn't help but clench her small fist and even gave it a little shake. "I'll definitely work hard." How could she lose to that girl? She hated that scheming, two-faced bitch the most. Xiao Ran nodded. "All right, I'll give you some special tutoring." Su Sheening was naturally surprised and pleased. "Really?" Xiao Ran said with great solemnity. "On a moonlit night by the 24 bridges, where might a beauty teach one to play the flute." Su Sheening understood instantly and couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Are you sure this is special tutoring for me?" But she thought about it, gritted her teeth, and still complied. There were 12 women now. If she didn't want to be just a pretty ornament, she had to show some initiative. The hovercraft bumped along and finally arrived at the steel mill. Xiao Ran had checked the map beforehand, and with his spatial sense constantly comparing the street views, he hadn't taken a single wrong turn, arriving smoothly at the steel mill. The steel mill was big, super big. Suching City was undergoing industrial upgrading, and heavily polluting industries like steel mills were slated for relocation. So, the steel mill had been actively looking for a buyer. It was said that some Lu Wentau-type conglomerate from Modu was interested in taking it over to build residences and commercial complexes here. Now, it seemed that would be impossible, which was just as well. Xiao Ran scanned with his spatial sense. Even within a 200-meter radius, large amounts of toxic gases were emanating. It couldn't be helped. Tar definitely contained many toxic substances. The cataclysm arriving was a good thing in a way. At least this toxic land couldn't be sold off anymore. The factory complex was huge, and Xiao Ran hadn't gone through the main gate. So, he parked the hovercraft against the perimeter wall, stored it away, then picked up Su Sheening, bent his knees slightly, and with a sudden exertion of strength, leaped over the 3-meter-high wall while carrying her. Su Sheening was still constantly rinsing her mouth, a disgusted look on her face. Xiao Ran chuckled. Stop rinsing now that we're off the craft. Be careful, or you'll freeze your mouth shut. It was over 30 degrees below zero outside. Hot water would instantly turn into ice crystals if splashed. Only then did Sheening Ran stop, shooting Xiao Ran a playful, reproachful glare. It's all your fault, you. Xiao Ran chuckled slyly, put his arm around Sheening Ran, and walked forward. In the snow, both were dressed in white, their hair hidden under white hats. Thus, they moved like phantoms in the snow, exploring the massive factory complex. In its heyday, this steel mill had over 10,000 employees, a true behemoth. Later, of course, it didn't have that many, but the scale of the complex remained, making it no wonder buyers wanted to convert it into commercial housing. Xiao Ran and Sheening Ran moved through one workshop after another. Fortunately, they didn't need to go inside to inspect closely. The sweep of his spatial sense revealed everything stored within. The huge complex was empty. So far, Xiao Ran hadn't detected any other living people. However, he could see traces of battles, and intense ones at that. Many workshops had collapsed. Not only that, but there were also large craters 6 or 7 meters deep, as if created by bombs, looking terrifying. Xiao Ran observed. From these leftover traces, he could roughly deduce the elemental affinities of the combatants' abilities, though many details remained obscure. Sheening Ran, however, was utterly astonished, whispering to Xiao Ran, was all this done by people? What had she seen? Besides collapsed walls, there were also various broken steel bars. Heavens, a fight that bent steel bars? Are you sure these were humans? She had indeed seen ability users before, but Song Hui's ability was ice-based, not the kind that could cause massive destruction of buildings. And against ordinary people, he wouldn't need to use much power. After that, she had been kept in a gilded cage, so to speak. So, her knowledge of ability users was truly limited. Seeing such a devastating scene now, she was genuinely frightened. Could human strength actually reach such a level? Xiao Ran just gently pulled her closer and smiled. It's all right. I'm stronger than all of them combined. This was no empty boast from Xiao Ran. Previously, he hadn't had a clear grasp of his own strength. But after defeating Lu Yong, his confidence soared, and he gained a precise understanding of his capabilities. Especially after wiping out Chao Sheening's building materials market in a single battle, Xiao Ran realized his power could crush most other ability users. And after that battle, he absorbed a massive amount of abilities and awakened the spatial compression power, which was a true game-changer. The crucial thing about spatial abilities, unlike others, was that he could prepare in advance. Take devastating weapons like his sonic stones and sonic rebar, for example. The materials were ordinary, and launching them consumed none of his own power. As long as he had enough stock, he could keep firing until the end of time. To go head-to-head with him, an opponent would need to have absorbed significantly more abilities. Otherwise, they'd just be blasted to bits. Human wave tactics? Against his overwhelming firepower, what good were numbers? So, Xiao Ran was genuinely just stating a simple fact. Sheening Ran nodded obediently. Whether she believed him or not, how could she embarrass a man at a time like this? The two continued their search. Stop, Xiao Ran said. He reached out, flicked his hand, and a stone shot forward, smashing the main door open with a bang. They walked inside, but it was pitch black. Sheening Ran found she couldn't see a thing. Xiao Ran couldn't see either, but he had spatial perception. It was all coke, an entire warehouse full. Xiao Ran immediately started collecting it. Vast quantities of coke vanished in a thin air. In just over 10 minutes, the entire warehouse was empty. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. On to the next one. Sheening Ran was already dumbfounded. She knew Xiao Ran had a spatial storage, but she'd never imagined this warehouse of his could be so enormous. Such a huge warehouse. How many tons of coke were there? Hundreds? Maybe even more? And yet, Xiao Ran had taken it all. And listened to him. On to the next one. It meant he could easily clear out another warehouse just like it. Heavens! She followed Xiao Ran in a daze to the next warehouse. This one, however, wasn't filled with coke, but with iron or awaiting smelting. Xiao Ran wasn't interested in taking it. Was he supposed to smelt iron and make steel himself? And as for using iron or to throw at people, forget it. He'd rather stock up on more stones. Next. The next one was a warehouse of finished steel products. Xiao Ran happily accepted these. They could be used as weapons. Imagine the destructive power of a several dozen-ton iron block slamming down. Coming out of this warehouse, they saw several sleds parked at the entrance of the next one. A group of people emerged, all carrying full backpacks. They hopped onto the sleds, and their team of enthusiastic sled dogs took off at a run. Through his spatial perception, Xiao Ran could see clearly that the next warehouse still contained coke. So, these people were likely transporting coke back to use as fuel. Why not use trucks? Well, trucks would need to be able to drive on snow. With snowdrifts 6 or 7 meters high, how could a truck possibly navigate? Must be Wei Liy's people. They'd conquered the steel mill, so naturally, they considered everything here their private property. But they couldn't move their main base here, so they were like ants moving house, hauling things back bit by bit. Speaking of which, the hot spring hotel already had hot springs, so why did they still need coke? The heating problem was solved, but what about cooking? 20 or 30-degree hot spring water could at best warm up dishes. It couldn't possibly be used for stir-frying or proper cooking. So, firewood, coke, or natural gas were still necessary. They needed at least one, or they'd be stuck eating bread every day. What should we do? Should we avoid them? Sheening asked. Why avoid them? Xiao Ran was surprised. Does this steel mill belong to them? But they were here first. Sheening said meekly. Xiao Ran chuckled. Just because they were here first, it's theirs? You're being a bit too reasonable. Besides, if we're talking about first come, first served, this place was occupied by some boss Jiang before Wei Liy took it over. So, there's no such thing as first come, first served now. It's all about who has the bigger fist. Now I've taken a fancy to this place, so this place is mine. Sheening seemed to have a hard time accepting this kind of thinking for a moment, and stood there looking a bit dazed. Xiao Ran didn't mind. Everyone has a different personality. If it had been one of those conniving girls, she would have definitely been grinning and pulling him away, afraid he'd change his mind. He looked at Sheening and said, I'll make a bet with you. Bet what? Sheening asked cautiously. Earlier, this guy had talked about giving her some special attention, which had left her flustered and tongue-tied. Now he wanted to make a bet. She was still a bit shaken. Xiao Ran grinned. Let's bet on how those people react when we go out. If they just try to chase us away, you win. But if they try to kill me and, snatch you away, then I win. How about it? Sheening hesitated for only a moment before saying, All right, I'll take that bet. If I win, you have to raise my level. Oh, I thought you were above such things. Turns out you care about it too, huh? Right? You don't want to let that kind of girl get the better of you. Fine. He nodded. If I win. Here, take this gun. You'll personally eliminate all of them. If you can't bring yourself to do it, fine, you can die in their place. He said it very calmly, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Sheening, however, was horrified and stared at Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. I'm not kidding you. Trembling, Sheening reached out and took the pistol. It was ice cold. She almost pulled her hand back, but seeing Xiao Ran's serious expression, she steeled herself and accepted the gun. Xiao Ran paid her no more attention, pushed the door open, and walked towards the warehouse ahead. After a moment of shock, Sheening quickly followed, fumbling to put the gun into her pocket as she went. The pocket of her down jacket was large enough to hold it easily. They walked forward. Before they had taken more than a few steps, the people from the warehouse ahead spotted them. Immediately, there was a lot of shouting and hollering, and soon a large group rushed out, all wearing gloves, their hands grimy and black. But there was one exception. This was a woman, around 30 years old. Her looks were about a 6 out of 10, just barely passing for attractive. She wasn't wearing gloves, and her hands were clean, making her stand out among the rough-looking men. She was clearly the leader of this group. Seeing this woman, Sheening felt a surge of relief. She naturally assumed that a woman wouldn't make things difficult for another woman. Her bet with Xiao Ran was surely won. Kill the man, take the woman. However, before they had even reached them, they heard the woman speak coldly. Instantly, a group of burly, rough-looking men charged over. Each of their faces was etched with savage cruelty and a gleeful anticipation for the fun times ahead. This woman was stunning and young, so pure-looking you could tell a glance. They guessed she'd only ever been with a man beside her. In an apocalypse like this, where else could you find someone so clean, aside from the women of powerful figures? So, every one of them was vicious, afraid of being a step too slow. Sheening's face paled in terror. But before she could react, Xiao Ran had already made his move. With a light wave of his hand, thump, 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 all the men were squeezed together. Actually, he didn't even need the hand gesture, but he thought waving looked cooler and could also mislead enemies into thinking the gesture was necessary to activate his ability. The men were instantly pressed against each other, jostling and shoving, as if caught in a fishing net. He hadn't killed them. He had said he'd let Sheening deal with them herself. Sheening finally snapped back to her senses, her voice trembling as she asked the woman in front of them, "We have no grudge against you. We don't even know each other. Why are you so malicious? She couldn't understand. The woman across from them couldn't help but chuckle. Little sister, are you living on a different planet? She didn't look at Sheening again, instead fixing her gaze on Xiao Ran. She wasn't the least bit surprised that her men had been incapacitated by Xiao Ran in a single move. In fact, she'd sent her men in precisely to confirm if Xiao Ran was an ability user, and ideally, to probe the nature of his powers. Unfortunately, she'd only managed to find out half of it. Xiao Ran was indeed an ability user, but how he'd turned her men into a tangled mess with just a wave of his hand, she couldn't fathom what kind of ability could do that. This is Sister Wei's territory. Get lost, she said coldly. Uncertain of the enemy's strength, she didn't want to start a fight rashly. She valued her life. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. I declare this place mine. The woman's expression instantly turned savage. You want to make an enemy of Sister Wei? Such audacity. Just then, Sheening, having recovered somewhat, cried out in disbelief. How can you be so unreasonable? We're in an apocalypse, a natural disaster. Humanity should be uniting to overcome these hardships. Why are we fighting amongst ourselves? If it were just those despicable men, she could almost grudgingly accept it. But you're a woman too. How can you be so cruel to another woman? The woman shot Sheening a look one might give an idiot, then said to Xiao Ran, don't you find such a naive, airhead woman annoying? She's usually cooped up in a mansion with nothing much to do, so it's fine by me. Xiao Ran ignored her provocation, simply stating faintly, let's keep it simple. Fight or not. The woman hesitated for a moment, then suddenly flashed a seductive smile. Big brother, don't be so fierce. You're scaring little me. Just moments ago, her face was savage, but now she was smiling like a blooming flower, a temptress. The change was so drastic it was unsettlingly awkward. Swish! The very next instant, a sonic speed rebar shot out, rocketing towards the woman. Plort! Although her entire body screamed a warning, she couldn't dodge or block the attack at all. It pierced straight through her head, which burst like a smashed watermelon, red and white matter splattering everywhere. Xiao Ran then released a frigid wind from his dimensional space. With a whoosh, it swept up the surrounding snow into a flurry. The woman had appeared to be feigning weakness, but in reality, she was releasing a toxin. His spatial perception clearly detected faint wisps of poisonous gas seeping from her pores. However, to poison Xiao Ran in such an open outdoor area, she would need more than a little time. That's why she had deliberately simpered, intending to stall for time so the toxin could drift toward Xiao Ran. But Xiao Ran gave her no such chance. Xiao Ran patted Sheening and said, kill all those men. The bet they'd made. Sheening had clearly lost. The brutes, trapped by spatial compression, found it hard to breathe. Their bones creaked, feeling like they could snap at any moment. Hearing Xiao Ran's words, they panicked beyond belief and began begging for mercy. Beauty, we were wrong. Give us a chance. I have a wife and kids. If I die, they'll die too. We were really wrong. Spare us. They played the pity card hard, painting themselves as utterly pathetic, hoping Sheening was a saintly type, overflowing with compassion, who would be soft-hearted even towards her enemies. Sheening shakily raised her gun, extremely nervous. She still needed some courage. Xiao Ran smiled and whispered in her ear, think about it. If you had fallen into their hands just now, would they have listened to your pleas? If you told them to stop, would they have obeyed you? They would have torn your clothes off and violated you amidst your cries. The more miserably you screamed, the more intensely you cried, the more excited they would have become. Natural disasters amplify the cruelest aspects of human nature. In an apocalypse, how many people can still hold on to their conscience? Of course, you can choose to let them off the hook. In that case, I'll just hand you over to them. Bang, bang, bang. Actually, before Xiao Ran had even finished speaking, Sheening had already pulled the trigger. It was just that her aim was terrible. 8 out of 10 shots were misses, but 2 did hit, though not fatally. The men began to wail and scream in agony. They knew begging was useless, so they started hurling the filthiest curses at Sheening. Sheening had emptied the magazine, but it didn't matter. Xiao Ran handed her another gun. Bang, bang, bang. Sheening continued to empty magazines. Her aim still hadn't improved much, but Xiao Ran didn't care, continuously handing her guns. Finally, the group of men fell silent. After emptying another magazine, Sheening reached for another gun, but Xiao Ran didn't offer one. Only then did she turn to look at him. They're all dead, Xiao Ran said with a smile. Sheening froze for a moment, then suddenly felt nauseous and started vomiting. She had actually killed over a dozen people in one go. Xiao Ran didn't comfort her. This was nothing. If she successfully evolved, she was destined to fight people. With this kind of mental fortitude, forget it. This was the apocalypse, not peacetime. Thinking of this, Xiao Ran couldn't help but think of Su Qingmei. Born from the same parents, how could their personalities be so different? If Su Qingmei were here, she wouldn't need Xiao Ran to say a word. She might even proactively ask him for a submachine gun or a rocket launcher and wipe this bunch out cleanly and efficiently. Big Sister was still the best. He let Su Shinran vomit her guts out. With a thought, he intensified the spatial compression. Pop, pop, pop. The skulls of those dozen or so men were crushed, instantly killing the few who were pretending to be dead to try and get away with it. Then, he walked over and absorbed the previous woman's ability. Very strong. If I had to quantify this woman's abilities, she'd have about 30 units worth. Humph. This woman must be a key enforcer in Wei Lily's faction. Otherwise, how could she have absorbed so much power? But if a mere subordinate possesses such strength, what about Wei Liy herself? How much power has that woman absorbed? The further time progresses, the stronger the leaders of these major factions become. It's like a snowball effect. Their advantage only grows. They control a base, a place that offers survival. So naturally, people will flock to them, be they ordinary folk or ability users. This allows them to expand easily and grow ever stronger. Especially since Wei Lily's group just wiped out Boss Zhang's crew. When one power falls, another naturally gets to feast. Just like when Xiao Ran destroyed the building materials market, how much power did he absorb in one go? Wei Liy even devoured Boss Zhang. Xiao Ran wouldn't underestimate anyone. My advantage is that currently absolutely no one knows where I live, and the villa in Nine Fortunes estate can be used as bait. I need to make good use of this. Also, I'm practically invincible in the dark. I need to leverage that too. Xiao Ran muttered to himself as he collected the coke from the warehouse. Unfortunately, apart from his spatial perception range increasing to 292 meters, his other abilities hadn't changed. Actually, there were some minor improvements. For instance, his spatial compression power had increased slightly, and the banishment duration had extended by half a minute, but aspects like size and effective distance remained the same. Of course, no new abilities had emerged either. My teleportation... Oh, when will you finally appear? Xiao Ran walked out of the warehouse to see Su Shinran had finally stopped vomiting, but her face was deathly pale. She clearly hadn't recovered from the shock of killing. He paid her no mind and continued his search. He took anything valuable he came across. However, Wei Liy had conquered this place some time ago, so essentials like food had naturally been moved out first. All that remained was coke, which was the only thing Wei Lily's faction valued here. As evening approached, Xiao Ran had pretty much cleared the entire steel mill of anything valuable. All right, time to go home. The two of them boarded the hovercraft. Xiao Ran naturally needed to release the side effects from absorbing abilities. Afterward, feeling refreshed, Xiao Ran piloted the craft back. Dense fog blanketing the world. No light at night. So what? I have spatial abilities. With my perception, I have nearly 300 meters around me completely mapped out. Afraid of getting lost? Not a chance. A little over 2 hours later, Xiao Ran successfully piloted the hovercraft back to Qingfeng Garden. By then, it was already past 8 in the evening. The women had already eaten dinner, assuming Xiao Ran and Su Shinran wouldn't return today. So, they were both surprised and overjoyed when the two arrived at this hour. Xiao Ran and Su Shinran had also eaten on the way, so upon returning home, Xiao Ran went straight for a shower. Today, he had also exposed Zhou Yunsu to the toxic hailstones, setting her on the path of evolution. One a day, Zhou Yunsu, unlike the stoic Su Qingmei, wasn't nearly as tough. She naturally cried her eyes out from the pain, struggling wildly in Xiao Ran's arms and even biting his arm. If Xiao Ran's skin hadn't been strengthened over 100 times, already tougher than cowhide, she might have actually drawn blood. A night passed. It was now the 64th day of the apocalypse. Over 2 months. In the early morning, Xiao Ran let out his customary sigh, then started wondering what to do today. Collect oil? Gather supplies? Not really interested. Play poker? They needed a break sometimes. Besides, Su Qingmei and Zhou Yunsu were both running fevers today, so they'd be too short. Then how about going to Nine Fortunes estate and playing with Chao Sheening and his group again? He'd left them hanging for a few days. It was time to reel in the net. Decided. Xiao Ran checked the mansion's defenses. Xiao Chuchio had already set up the weapons network. First, there was extensive surveillance. If anyone entered within 500 meters of the villa, the system would perform facial recognition to identify friend or foe. Face covered? Then no need for recognition. They'd be classified as an enemy immediately. Next came the weapon systems. With Chiao, an ability user who could control electronics, any weapon could be automated. The modification was incredibly simple. Under such dense covering fire, most ability users wouldn't be able to take a single step past the perimeter. Of course, if someone had the combat power of Lu Yong, they could forcefully break through the weapon array. But that possibility was small, extremely slim even. Today, Xiao Ran didn't bring anyone, heading to Nine Fortunes Estate alone. He planned to have a major fight. It was just that the journey took too long. Over 3 hours later, he finally arrived near Nine Fortunes Estate. He first stored away the hovercraft and then began to search. He believed old Gao would definitely have people staking out the area, or might even be nearby himself. If Xiao Ran could find him, he could solve the problem once and for all. About 10 minutes later, Xiao Ran appeared on the top floor of a building. He pushed the door open and saw 2 people inside. One was cooking something over a fire, while the other was looking down below with binoculars. It was unmistakably Xiao Ran's villa they were watching. "What are you looking at?" Xiao Ran asked with a smile. This gave the two a huge fright, and they both turned to look at Xiao Ran. "Who are you?" they asked in alarm. Xiao Ran chuckled. "Weren't you surveilling me? How do you not know who I am, right?" Old Gao's group had only heard Chao Sheening's description of his appearance. But descriptions are too abstract. Could they really let others know what he actually looked like? Hearing this, the 2 men suddenly reacted. "You're Xiao Ran," they blurted out. Xiao Ran nodded and smiled. "Old Gao, that is Gao Yong. You're his man, right?" The 2 men exchanged a glance and nodded with bitter expressions. They were just ordinary people. How could they dare to act tough with an ability user? They just couldn't figure out how Xiao Ran had found them. There were so many buildings here. Wouldn't it take one person an eternity to search? Xiao Ran asked again, "Where's old Gao?" "We don't know." The 2 exclaimed first, then explained, "We were just ordered to keep watch here and contact them by walkie-talkie if we see anyone entering or leaving the villa." They pointed to a walkie-talkie on the side. It was a common civilian walkie-talkie with a maximum range of under 5 kilometers, but that was under ideal conditions. With many obstacles, this distance would decrease. The normal communication range was only about 3 kilometers. But even with just a 3-kilometer radius from here, how large would that entire area be? Xiao Ran rubbed his chin. Old Gao really was cautious. It wasn't out of the question for Xiao Ran to search this 3-kilometer area. After all, he possessed spatial perception with a range of nearly 300 meters. He didn't need to climb any buildings. Just by standing at the base and sweeping his senses, he could fully grasp the situation within an entire structure. Therefore, scouring such a large area wouldn't be difficult for him. "Fine, I'm idle anyway," Xiao Ran thought. "Old Gao, Chao Sheening, if you want to play, then I'll play along." Xiao Ran casually killed the 2 men he'd encountered, then dashed out and began to search the vast region. A 3-kilometer radius translated to an area of nearly 30 square kilometers. It was quite an astonishing figure when he considered it. Xiao Ran made full use of his spatial perception. He first moved about 150 meters away from the building he was in, then made a circle, allowing his perception to cover an entire area with a 300-meter radius. Then, he advanced another 300 meters, made another circle, and significantly expanded the circular search area. The larger the radius, the longer it took him to complete a circuit. Within this vast area, he did discover quite a few living people, even residents in various housing complexes, but their situation was hard to put into words. It could only be described with a grim phrase, a living hell. How are most people surviving now? Cannibalism. Xiao Ran had no intention of being some champion of justice. As long as others didn't provoke or threaten him, he couldn't be bothered with them. So, he continued his search without pause. How'd he confirm if he'd found his target? Simple. Look for a radio walkie-talkie. People with a walkie-talkie in their room weren't necessarily the target, but if there wasn't one, they definitely weren't. Finally, at the edge of the 3-kilometer maximum radius, he found people using a walkie-talkie. It was 2 men, not ability users. They had a bonfire going with water boiling over it, and a pile of empty instant noodle containers beside them. Creak! The door was pushed open, and Xiao Ran walked in. These 2 reacted much more professionally, simultaneously grabbing the handguns they had placed beside them and aiming. "Who's there?" they both shouted, their voices laced with killing intent. Definitely not one of ours, they thought. Our people wouldn't be bringing supplies at this time, and if anyone else were coming, we would have been notified beforehand. Xiao Ran frowned. Old Gao was truly slippery. He'd actually stationed these two here as a relay, but he himself wasn't present. Does he expect me to search another half a day, centered around this point? Xiao Ran mused. That's another nearly 30 square kilometers. I'd run my legs off. Besides, the longer it took, the greater the chance Old Gao would realize something was wrong, because he wouldn't be able to contact his men by radio. So, searching again like this probably wouldn't yield any results. Old Gao would have likely packed up and fled overnight. I don't like people pointing guns at me, he said lightly. I'll point it if I damn well please. What are you gonna arg? The two wanted to retort, but a sharp pain shot through their wrists, making it impossible to hold their guns, which all clattered to the ground. An ability user. The thought flashed through both their minds simultaneously, and they began to tremble. My name is Xiao Ran, he said casually. Where's Old Gao? He still had to ask. The two grew even more terrified. The name Xiao Ran was hardly unfamiliar. He was the terrifying figure who had annihilated Chiao Sheening's faction, with only Chiao Sheening himself narrowly escaping. How could they possibly stand against him? They might have tried to bluff their way out, but with Xiao Ran himself at their doorstep, was bluffing even an option? So, both of them were very honest. We don't know where the boss is either. And there are 4 groups like ours, stationed at the north, south, east, and west points. So, even the ones who contact us don't necessarily know where the boss is. Damn it. Xiao Ran rested his chin in his hand. Old Gao was even more slippery than he'd imagined. He actually had 4 such relay stations. So, which relay station connected to which subsequent relay station could actually contact Old Gao was, naturally, unknown. If he really followed this trail, how long would it take to find Old Gao? Crucially, Old Gao wasn't stupid. He'd definitely contact his subordinates from time to time. If he noticed something was wrong, wouldn't he flee? How could someone be this infuriatingly cautious? Xiao Ran was furious, because someone was actually more slippery than him. This was just too much. Xiao Ran waved his hand. Thump, thump. Both men went limp and collapsed to the ground. Spatial severance. Killing without shedding blood. What exactly is Old Gao trying to do? Xiao Ran wondered. Just watching my place and not making a move? He'd clearly confirmed I was inside before, so why not launch a major offensive? So, is he off trying to get missiles? Or is he busy recruiting people? Xiao Ran muttered. The 5 major factions of Sioux City. Old Gao isn't thinking of uniting all of them, is he? Haha, over 3 billion in supplies. Even if split 5 ways, that's an astonishing fortune. Others might be blinded by greed and want it all for themselves, but Old Gao is so cautious, so slippery. I bet he wouldn't dare face me alone. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fled from the gas corporation building that day. He would have laid his cards on the table and fought me decisively. Faced with this kind of slippery character who'd chicken out and hide before a fight even started, Xiao Ran was at a loss. Unless his spatial perception could cover 1/10 of Sioux City, how could he possibly find a specific person in such a vast city? Back then, if I had Xiao control the surveillance systems, we might have been able to find Old Gao, but that's impossible now. How many surveillance cameras were even still working? Xiao Ran realized he was actually stumped by Old Gao. A hidden rat is just too hard to find. Since Old Gao is coveting my supplies, no matter how patient he is, he'll eventually have to make a move. No, wait, I can actually take the initiative. Xiao Ran clapped his hands, feeling like his thinking had been too narrow. Isn't Old Gao looking for allies? If I go to his potential allies' place beforehand and lie in wait, I can catch him easily. I need to learn to think outside the box. I'll go to Wei Lily's place and wait for Old Gao to show up. Perfect. I can also scope out Wei Liy while I'm at it. I've already killed 2 waves of her subordinates, so we'll likely be enemies in the future. I should gauge her strength. After all, she's the powerhouse who destroyed the steel mill, so she must be very strong. Xiao Ran decisively headed towards Liuyang Mountain. No need to worry about home. At least there was an ability user holding down the fort, and he had left behind plenty of weapons. Not many ability users at this stage could withstand such firepower. Food and fuel were also sufficient. Besides, it wasn't like he couldn't leave Wei Lily's place if he went. Worst case, he'd just make his move early. Haha, if Old Gao went looking for Wei Liy only to find the place in ruins and deserted, wouldn't he be scared enough to take his men and flee Sioux City immediately? Xiao Ran rather looked forward to seeing Old Gao's expression then. Can't underestimate the enemy, though. Wei Liy defeated Boss Jiang. Her strength wasn't weak to begin with. If she absorbed Boss Jiang's abilities, her power would naturally be skyrocketing. Plus, she's still hunting other ability users. Her strength cannot be underestimated. Absolutely cannot afford to fail due to carelessness. He was going as the hunter, not as prey delivered to someone's doorstep. Over 2 hours later, he arrived at the foot of Little Yang Mountain. By then, it was only an hour until nightfall. He put away his hovercraft and proceeded up the mountain on foot. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. He thought for a moment, a faint smile playing on his lips. Teacher Yu, I really didn't mean to make a subtle jab at you with that. Xiao Ran trekked up the mountain on foot. Mister, Lu had once said, there's no path in the world until enough people walk it. The heavy snow had buried the original trail, but as more and more people made the climb, a new path was gradually carved out. Xiao Ran followed this path upward. Halfway up the mountain, he spotted a massive resort, Sunny Ridge Hot Spring Resort. This was Wei Liy's base of operations. He approached and saw that while the main gates were shut tight, there were people inside the guard booth. His spatial awareness told him clearly there were 3 snipers stationed around the hotel, all with guns trained on him. Xiao Ran appeared calm on the outside, but he was fully prepared. If any of those fingers on the triggers so much as twitched, he'd immediately open a portal in front of himself, or exile his body into another space entirely. Who are you? Someone called from the guard booth. The window cracked open, revealing a man's face. The instant the window opened, frigid wind blasted in, making the man shiver violently. Xiao Ran gave a proud smile. I'm an ability user. I've come to join Sister Wei. An ability user. The guard instantly stiffened. Wait right there. I'll inform the others. He shut the window and grabbed a walkie-talkie. Xiao Ran couldn't hear what was being said, but his spatial perception easily picked up the conversation. This power is perfect for infiltration, he thought. For exams, it's basically cheating. This was one of the key reasons Xiao Ran dared to walk into a lion's den alone. Teacher Yu, I swear I wasn't taking a shot at you. Not long after, 2 people emerged from the hotel. As they reached the gate, the guard braved the cold, hurriedly unlocked the door, and pulled it open. Come on in. The 2 beckoned him forward. Xiao Ran followed them toward the main building. The 3 snipers still kept their aim on him. Only once he passed through the entrance did their crosshairs finally shift away. The moment he stepped inside, warm air enveloped him. The 2 men took off their coats and hats. Xiao Ran removed his thick outer layer, then his hat and goggles. He had also added a fake beard, thickened his eyebrows, and wore colored contacts. He looked nothing like his usual self. What's your name? One of them asked. Summer, Xiao Ran replied with a dazzling smile, flashing perfect white teeth. The 2 men chuckled. A name like Summer in weather like this. How ironic. What type of ability do you have? The other asked. I'm a powerhouse, Xiao Ran declared proudly. All right, let's test that out. They led him to the resort's gym. Show us what you've got. Xiao Ran strolled over and casually lifted a treadmill with one hand, tossing it into the air and catching it like it weighed nothing more than a ping-pong ball. Damn, one of them laughed. You're not just a powerhouse. We'd call you a warrior type. High defense, massive health pool, and strong as hell. Just like a tank in an online game. Gamers, Xiao Ran thought. He didn't bother to argue. Instead, he asked, with this level of strength, what kind of treatment can I expect here? They both laughed. Have you ever absorbed someone else's power? One of them asked. Wait, you can do that. Xiao Ran feigned surprise. Knew it. You're a newbie, they said, chuckling again. No worries. You know now, warrior types are valued here. But since you're new, you can't expect high rank right away. Let's start you in Team 2 under Sister Wu. Join some missions. If you prove yourself, you'll have a chance to acquire new abilities. Prove your loyalty, and you'll get everything you've ever wanted. Xiao Ran laughed along with them. They brought him upstairs and knocked on one of the doors. Come in, a woman's voice called from inside. The men opened the door. Xiao Ran had already scanned the room with his spatial sense, but still gave a show of casually glancing around before fixing his eyes on the woman doing squats. She wore tight blue yoga pants, perfectly hugging her shapely backside. When she dropped into a squat, the firm curve split into 2 pronounced plump hemispheres. The 2 men stared so hard it looked like their eyeballs might pop out and get stuck in the fabric. But when the woman turned around, they immediately looked away, trying to appear proper. Xiao Ran didn't stare, not because he was above it, but because he'd seen this kind of scene too many times. Women like Su Qingmei and the others were all top-tier stunners, so his self-control had long since been honed. The woman looked to be in her mid-30s, a solid 7 out of 10 in the looks department, above average. Her chest was especially prominent under a tight black t-shirt, with a deep, almost blindingly white cleavage. She had a head of voluminous curls and pale skin, with lips red as fire, exuding a seductive charm. What's up? She asked casually. Sister Wu, this one's new. Warrior type. You were looking for someone to fill that spot, so we figured we'd bring him to you. Both men were careful not to let their eyes linger. This woman was dangerously tempting, and if they stared too long, they might get punished. Just thinking of her wielding a whip made them shudder. That wasn't any kind of playful punishment. It was the real deal. The curvy woman gave Xiao Ran a once-over, then stretched her chest. Instantly, both men blushed and looked away again. "What's your name?" she asked. Such generosity, Xiao Ran thought, keeping his gaze clear and steady. "Summer." She nodded. "I'm a wanting. Team 2 leader. From now on, you're mine." "Yours?" That sounded suggestive. Xiao Ran nodded. "Got it." Wu Wanting walked over to her desk, rummaged through a drawer, then tossed him a key. "Room 206 is yours. Rest up tonight. I'm leading a mission tomorrow. Don't drag me down." Xiao Ran caught the key and nodded. "No problem." The three men left the room. As the door closed behind them, they caught a glimpse of Wu Wanting resuming her squats. That peachy, plump figure was enough to make a man drool. "Ha." The two men nudged Xiao Ran with knowing winks before walking off. Xiao Ran made his way to room 206. He didn't even need to step inside to sense the hidden surveillance inside, but he acted none the wiser. The room looked like a standard hotel suite. The only thing that set it apart was the oversized bathtub. Fancy, he thought. They even have hot baths. Gotta love a hot spring resort. Xiao Ran slipped into the tub, letting the warm water wash over him. He didn't move, almost as if he were asleep. In a hidden corner, a surveillance camera tracked his every move. But what the observer didn't know was, he was also within Xiao Ran's perception range.